Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to the GTSRL Season 35. I'm your host, Paul TX141 Walsh, also known as Britain the Spit, and we're tuning in for round 2 of 3 in this season, the finale in terms of the seasons for 2020. And carrying on from where we left off last week, we now return to looking at the EU Division 1 guys as they head to France and attempt to tackle the first of two formidable French circuits that they've to face. This one being Saint-Croix, or in full, Circuit de Saint-Croix. A rather odd looking circuit when you look at that circuit map, in the fact it consists of 20 corners, give or take. And the majority of these corners being at right angles, i.e. 90-degree corners, which many drivers are not huge fans of, simply because there is a rather lack of variety in terms of the corner angles. However, rest assured, each of these corners presents a rather interesting challenge of its own, and in some cases, some rather finicky track limits which our drivers will look to exploit to get the utmost in terms of lap time. Now, in the opening 5 minutes whilst we're waiting to get underway, it's worth noting that in a couple minutes time I will be doing some demo laps for those of you who are interested in trying to get a little bit more in terms of lap time or just getting a feel for the circuit. So feel free to tune in just under 4 minutes time when we'll get out on the circuit, and I'll give you a breakdown of what to look out for, as I'll be bringing out the trusty Porsche 962C 1988. But in the meantime, what you can see looking at the board on the right hand side is that the majority, if not all, of our drivers have transitioned over to the Porsche 962C for this circuit. Now, of course, with tuning being available, it means that each driver is going to bring their own flavour to the car in terms of gearing, suspension setup, roll bar setup, etc. You name it, each one's going to be slightly more unique than the other, and you can imagine that each driver will be looking to exploit the most out of their car to get every bit of lap time. Now, this is important because of the fact that this is such a long lap, with a lap coming in at approximately 2.5 minutes, albeit we're probably looking on an average of about 2 minutes 35 with our faster drivers here in EU Division 1, that with these long laps there's only a limited number of laps available. In our 2 sprint races that start off tonight, you are going to see a total of 4 laps, and then in the endurance race, which makes up race number 3, you are going to see a total of 7 laps. But the net result will be that because the track is so long and you've got so many limited laps, you've got to try and get the most out of every single lap, and it will count in every single sector, because you make one mistake here and that can be amplified massively going into the next sector and in terms of overall lap time. Now, welcome of course to those of you who have joined recently, and I hope you're all doing well and had a good start to your week as we get ever closer to Christmas. So we're just counting down right now before we get out on circuit, but as we're waiting here, we will talk a little bit about the story once we're waiting for the start checks to commence. So that'll be at 19:45 Greenwich Mean Time, or UTC. But as people are piling in, and welcome to all those of you tuning in, Vincimo1, Robert D'Amico, Dr. Otterface, and Zeronic so far. The thing about tonight, I think what's going to be important is our drivers are mastering and running in that weak slipstream, so that 2.25 second slipstream zone behind cars, because they'll be able to use that in order to maximise their lap time, particularly in the final 3 sectors of this circuit, where the track goes from being more technical to a much faster pace and all about getting the utmost speed for your apexes and making sure that you can apply full throttle no matter where you go. So it's going to be crazy in terms of the fact that you can imagine that everybody's going to bunch up through the opening sectors, and then in the final couple of sectors, that's where we'd expect that all the action is really going to kick off, because the circuit opens up in sectors 4 to 6, and that's where things can get very spicy, as seen in FIA races over the course of 2020 and 2019. And as a number of people will note as well, this circuit does not feature too often in FIA, but when it does, it normally ends up throwing a spanner in the works for a lot of drivers, simply because of its length and also those 90-degree corners. Without further ado then, let's head out onto the track and let's talk a little bit about the lap. Okay, so we're running out on our own Porsche 962C. Now, for the purposes of keeping all things equal, I'm not running a tune on this car. I'm running balance of performance, but this is the default tune in our car. So as we head out here, we're going to make sure we come out in a nice amount of air. Turn 1, coming up. You want to brake at about 100 metres or a bit before that, depending on how you've got your brakes set up. 90-degree corner with tarpaulin on the right-hand side here. You can use 2 wheels on that tarpaulin on the right-hand side. It's a 3rd gear corner. And then you've got this nice long run up here, all the way up towards through turn 2, as Eclipse returns to the track here. We're just going to saunter on by Eclipse. Turn 2, completely flat out right-hander. And then we've got turn 3, heavy braking zone at about the 100 metre board here. and it's a third or second gear corner depending on your tuning. Be careful of the fact that it's an uphill apex, which means that will destabilise the car. And also that means you can get a bit over greedy on apex effectively there, and you can overextend beyond the limits. Now turn 4 here, braking at about the 50 board, just a light tap on the brakes. Some drivers will just want to lift, staying in third gear through here, which we'll do. And then you've got turn 5 coming up, this gentle left-hander here, where you want to hold the car as close to the left-hand side barrier as possible. Coming up to turn 6, you slam down the brakes here in third gear, and you want to cut as close to the apex curb as possible, and then gradually power out using the full width of the circuit for another right-hander here, as we're coming through turn 7, which is a third gear corner as well. Of course, I'm not pushing right now, I will shortly. Turn 8's coming up. This is a long run down to turn 8 by comparison with your previous runs. We're going to stay over to the left here because we've got 2 drivers coming through. So we'll give it 1 second for those gentlemen come through. We've got De Grid, and we've also got Spalgazen. What you can imagine here is that with 8, you're braking at the 100 board. Third gear corner, you want to tuck it nice and tight, but then start to get adventurous on the power because the circuit is very wide here. And then you're going to be full throttle up into 9. As you're coming through 9 here, then you've got 10, which is a downhill braking zone. Very gentle downhill braking zone in terms of it's a lovely flowing corner. You want to clip as much of the apex curve as possible. And then coming through here, turn 11, one of the trickiest corners. A lot of drivers will be going for this flat out when they've got a proper tuner. We can't do it flat out without tuning. And it is a corner which sets you up for a very long straight. And as you come out of 11 here, you want to be powering down the straight, which marks the transitions to the second half of the circuit. The idea being you want to stay over to the right eventually as you're coming up into the high-speed chicane here. So turns 12 and 13, you're going to brake at about the 150 board coming down to third gear here. You want to cut as much as that entry curve as possible. Of course, we're not running maximum speed here, so we're losing the downforce effect on the car. And you've got to run up to a hairpin, braking at about the 100 board, coming down to second gear. You want to get as close as possible to the inside barrier and then power out the corner. But remember, you want to straighten that steering because otherwise you'll snap oversteer like we just did there. And also our tyres are cold. Now through 15, we're coming through here. This is a third gear corner 15. We've overshot a little bit there, but your braking point is about 90 metres from corner. Now we've got the bridge here, the transition into the final stages. And the point of the bridge here is you get a long run up into a low speed chicane here. You're going to brake at about the 150 board. Now keep in mind you've got tarpauling on your right hand side here. You want to cut that tarpauling if you can with 2 wheels, but do not get greedy with it, because otherwise you'll pick up a track limit penalty. And in the end of the chicane there, now you've got a very high intensity right-hander here, where you want to do this completely flat out, coming out wide initially, and then powering through, and just keeping the car hooked up as much as humanly possible. And then you've got a braking zone coming up here, which marks the final left-hander of the circuit. So this is turn 19. You want to cut as much of that apex curve as possible. We're going to do it in third gear on the full power lap. And then 20 is a simple right-hander, 90 degrees once again. Third gear, just simply hook it up by braking just after the 150 board. So without further ado then, let's go for a faster lap. Let's hammer it. Using full width of the circuit then, come up into fourth gear. We're not going to upshift into fifth because we don't need an upshift here because of the upshift delay. We're going to brake at about the 100 board here, coming down into third, trailing it in. And you can see our tyres are a little bit cold at the moment, so that's why we're not getting as much turn. We could have broken at about 110 metres instead, that would have been more effective. Going through 2 then, completely flat out, staying to the right. Braking hard at the 100 board here, third gear. Trailing it through on the brakes, clipping that apex curve and then powering out. Now coming up into 4, just lightly dabbing the brake and then rotating. And you can see we didn't apply enough brake there, that's why we went wide, and that's what's getting greedy. Through 5, flat out, upshift to 4th, now down into 3rd for 6. We're going to trail it across the apex curve here. Now build that throttle, build it, there you go. And then through 7, we're going to do a very similar thing. You want to cut this one as much as possible, as you're about to see. You can cut it very, very generously, but not too generously, because if you get all 4 wheels essentially on the grass and into the curb, then that will mean that you do pick up a half-second penalty. And then through here, we've got that third gear corner, of course, as we mentioned earlier. Now you're just going to hook the car as left as possible. Going up. We're going to hit the rev limiter and stamp on the brake, just gently through. And then going through here. We went a bit wide there, but again, tyres are very cold at the moment because we've let them prattle around on circuit. We just put the brake on there because we can't do this corner completely flat out as we come through 11. Now we're going to do the long run down to 12 and 13. And hello to Zepp Arms and Jerry the race driver. Upshifting into 5th then. Let's go for the high-speed chicane. Let's do this right. Tucking it in and cutting as much as possible. Did a little lift there to stabilise the car. Up in a 4th. Now the hairpin, braking just before the 100 board. And what you're going to see is we're going to trail in, start building that power, build it, and unleash. And now coming up to the bridge then, so braking at about 90 metres. You can use second gear if you so desire here, but keep in mind you will have the delay in the gear shift to contend with when you upshift back to third. That's why I don't like to use second through that corner. Now charging along the bridge here, coming up to the low speed chicane, braking at the 150 board there and trailing it across into the tarpaulin. We hesitated a little bit there, but the reason we hesitated was because, as well as the fact that we just haven't got the confidence in the car right now, but we will on the next lap. Also, you've got to keep in mind you do go over a little bump in the road which can unsettle the car, but completely flat out through here. Now coming into the final two corners then, so braking down a third and trailing across apex. Could have been a bit smoother on the throttle input there, could actually been more aggressive. And then coming up to the final corner here. So that is just a simple lap of the circuit, and now we're going to go a little bit faster for your viewing pleasure, and we're going to try and get into those 2-minute 30s. As so far we've been able to hit a 2-minute 40.8. Well, we can go faster. So first gear on up. There you go, just throwing the car in. Well, now we're going to go properly. There we go, Eclipse is off circuit, so we're just going to respect the fact he's off. And now coming out and inwards, so trailing across. You can see just letting the car settle through these corners. It's a very nice car to drive, even without any tuning on it. And it just means you can be really, really confident in terms of the way the car flows through. Think of it like flowing water. I'm going to cut as much of this corner as possible, but then you'll note that I'm starting to build that throttle to use the limits of the circuit, and it means I get a really nice flow up the hill here, hit that rev limiter of course, and then trail across apex, which you're allowed to do. You can abuse that apex really nicely. Now coming into this corner, we're using the brake, but you don't have to use the brake here, it's just my preference. We're going to build that power, now we're going to charge along the road. This is the Porsche 962C 1988 edition, the Le Mans car from the Group C era. Now charging into the corner of course, we're going to brake, two, and then turn it in, and power through, power through, power through. Just have a bit of confidence, stamp up into fourth gear, and now brake nice and hard for the hairpin. Bit too heavy on the brakes there, could have been a little bit lighter. You know, we straightened the steering there to settle the car. We're going to stay in third here, and you can see why, because it just gives us a bit more rear stability as we're coming through the corner, and also gives us a little bit of flow onto the outer curb. Carrying more speed, up into fourth. Yeah, and you can drive entirely different. There's all different driving styles in GT Sport. I'm just more gentle in terms of my wheels. You can use second gear for the low speed chicane if you so desire. Again, I personally prefer using third, simply because I give myself a little bit more stability and take away a gear shift. Now we're just going to completely hammer it through here. Gone a bit wide of apex, could have got that a lot better actually. And again, if you get a little bit too wide of apex in both those corners, you're going to feel it because the car will understeer further. That, so we cut the final corner there, which you can get away with cutting the final corner. That's a 2-minute 40. Wasn't a perfect lap, we could have done better. We're ready, we've got 1 or 2 more laps to go, and feel free to throw some questions in or some thoughts if you're tuning in now and got a couple of questions or two. That's the thing, you can get really picked off by the fact if you run wide out of some of these corners, the car will just simply go away with you. And it's not just Group C cars where you'll experience that. Group 3s around here can be very finicky, because as soon as you carry too much momentum through one of these corners, you just end up drifting onto the grass, and the grass just seems to want to take you away. It just seems to want to claim you. Could have broken a bit later there. No pineapple on a pizza. For example, you can just simply lift into this corner if you want to be a bit different. You don't have to use the brakes into turn number 11. Turn number 11. You can just do a gentle lift, which also helps in a bit of tyre wear. can see there where we broke just a little too late and it cost us a bit of our turning motion. Again, I expect the guys who are going to be racing tonight are going to do a lot better in terms of lap times. Again, we haven't tuned this. It's just to give you a feel for what you can do. I'll show you a second gear through here now. You can also clip the curb of the second part of that chicane. Just keep in mind, of course, when you do clip the curb, it is raised, so it's going to kick the car up in the air, and that in turn can lead to your car getting a bit unsettled. And you don't want to turn in early through what is effectively turn 18. You don't want to turn in too early, besides you'll clip the inside wall as we did there. And that's the thing, turn 18 is an odd one because you've got a lot of aero on a Group C car, so you've got to have that confidence to know you don't have to turn in aggressively compared to, say, a Group 4 or a Group 3 car. We're going to do one more lap and then we're going to get off the circuit and get out of the way because we're a bit of a pleb compared to everybody else around us. So here we go then, one last lap and I'll start taking you through the field and the story so far. You can see how much of turn 1 you can cut. You can use pretty much the whole width of the tarpaulin as long as you keep 2 wheels beyond the white lines. And I think we've got a driver coming up behind us. We are going to actually get out the way and get off the circuits for them. There we go. It's not fair to Dylan to block. He's actually going to be racing at the end of the day, so we will hop away now. Alrighty then, so without further ado, we're going to switch the old steering wheel off and then we are going to get underway. So just give us 2 seconds, ladies and gentlemen. Alrighty, so without further ado then, let's get underway and take a look through our field. So, last time out the story was as follows. Olaf Biscuit, British driver, had a phenomenal opening round whereby, winning all 3 of the opening races, Olaf was, well, simply the biscuit that didn't crumble compared to everybody else. And the thing about Olaf as well was he didn't exactly have it easy. Throughout, he had a huge amount of pressure vested on him by the drivers around him, particularly in the battle for the top 4 positions, and none other, funnily enough, than his teammate, CSX's Dylan Cliff. Now, Dylan, the Irish driver, who is, as I've just said, Olaf's teammate, currently sitting on 44.5 points compared to Olaf's 49. Dylan had a very good run, albeit he did lose out a little bit in race number 2 of the first round, in that he came 3rd in what was race number 2, meaning he just dropped a couple of points, so rather than getting the clean sweep of 2nd places, he ended up with 12 points in at race number 2, meaning that he's lost a little bit of ground, but not too much. Now, meanwhile, in 3rd in the championship right now, currently sitting on 43 points, is Yaya777, who we're just going to refer to as Yaya from this point onwards. Now, Yaya had a very good string of races as well and was really competitive, picking up the 2nd place in race 2 at the cost of Dylan's success, of course, and in race 1 and in race 3 picking up the 3rd places to the bottom step of the podium. We're not too far off for these guys. Currently sitting in P4 in the championship is Austria's own Kleinsee 1978, where Kleinsee had a good mix of runs as well, in fact picking up 10 points in race number 1 for his 5th place, race number 2 picking up the 4th place, and then in race number 3 picking up another 5th place. And what you can imagine from Klein's, he is currently sitting in P4 on 36 points. There's quite a gap between himself and Yaya in third. The gap between these two drivers being 7 points in total. But he will try and close it up over the course of the rest of this season. You can imagine he's going to do his utmost to try and close it up at this point today. Because from what is first all the way down to 4th in the championship, it's 13 points between our drivers. And it only takes one bad race from one of our top runners at the moment to see their advantage as Klein's goes very wide out of turn 11. For their advantage to diminish. And then currently sitting at 5th in the championship, we have one, if I can find the gentleman, and I actually need to get the car out of the entry pool, just realised that. We do have one D31. Now Dutch driver, D had a very good opening round in the fact that he's currently sitting P5 in the championship with 32.5 points. His best result last time out was a 5th place in race number 2. D picking up a strong result there. And, well, really looking to see how he can improve on the results from last time out. Moving away from D then and over to Inman. Now, Inman didn't have necessarily the best of moments in the last ones as we wait for the stock check to occur. So we're just going to hop over to Inman's car when we get to the stock check. We can see that Iman at the moment, who's in P3 for the purposes of this start check. Iman had a rather good opening round as well, his best result being a P4. What was it? Yep, it was definitely a P4 in race number 1 last time. As they all get underway with the opening pull-off and start check, you can see as they all come charging up into turn 1, then they're going to have to be aware of the fact that the corner does have a lot of width to offer too wide, but they have to be very careful about giving one another space, because otherwise drivers can end up going onto the outer curb and onto the grass and trying to power through, and then you can see drivers literally sliding into one another as a result, as you get a little bit of snap oversteer running onto the grass. The hardest braking zone to begin with, and the one where you're going to see a lot of carnage in action, will be going into turn 3, where all of our drivers are going to be stamping on the anchors, and with cold tyres and a lot of fuel in the car, you can imagine they've literally got to curb a huge amount of momentum at very short notice. So that'll be an interesting one. As we switch away from Spalgazan and move on over, well, we're looking at Spalgazan at the moment, and we're going to switch away from him briefly to take a look at one other driver when he does materialise out on circuit, although it doesn't look as though he has, and we were going to hop over to Mikhail next, and Mikhail. So instead, we are going to stay with Spalgazan, who's currently sitting in P9 in the championship with 20 points. Didn't have the best results last time out, his best result coming in the form of race number 2, picking up a good 7 points there. You can imagine he's going to do his utmost today to try and move a little bit further up the table. The one, however, we wanted to talk about, who's currently sitting at P7 in the championship, your season 34 EU Division 1 winner, was Meccano7, who's currently sitting on 30.5 points in P7. His best result last time out coming in the form of race number 3 with those 16.5 points, really going nicely into his bank account for what was a P4, if I remember correctly. And I think McCann here is going to be really trying to push to get onto those podiums, because we know that McCann is a very strong driver, particularly in the longer race number 3, the endurance race. And welcome to those of you who have joined into the stream chat quite recently. Just waiting, of course, for more stock checks to get underway. But as we continue to go through our roster then, next up is our Australian driver of Chronic Opal. Now, Opal, last time out, had a bit of a mixed affair. Didn't have the best set of results all round, with 24.5 points accrued as a result of round 1. His best result coming in the form of 8 points in the opening race of round 1. You can imagine here he'll be looking to better his results as he's coming through the end of Sector 2 right now and just getting a little bit more practice whilst we're waiting for stock check number 2 to get underway. What with KLS1? Well, I used to call Calzone, but I've been told to rephrase it to KLS1. Well, we'll wait for KLS1 to get back in. And now moving away from Chronocopel and Spalgazan, then we move over to our 10th place driver in the standings at the moment, and that is one Mr. Eclipse. He's just sitting here at the moment waiting to get underway. Eclipse currently sitting on 16 points. Best result of the first round was in race number 1, picking up 7 points. You can imagine he's going to try and do a little bit better today, an inch further towards the front. Also keep in mind that Eclipse is running on a steering wheel now, steering wheel and pedals, whereas previously he's been running on a DualShock 4 controller, or a DS4 controller. So this is a new era for Eclipse, and fingers crossed for him that he's able to pull off a good result here, as he will definitely be looking to do so, and looking to refine the momentum that he used to have on controller and the steering wheel and pedals. Looking beautiful, of course, the Rothmans livery. I concur with those of you who are pointing that out right now in the stream chat. And as we switch over then to what is our 11th place driver in the standings, that is De Gret, the German driver, of course, who we all know and love. Gret didn't have the best of runs either in the opening round, picking up 14 points in total, only 2 off of Eclipse in the battle for P10. These guys are very close. His best result coming in the form in race 1 as well. And we can expect that Gret's going to try and improve upon last time's results, because he is a very fast driver once he hits his stride. Then we do have MDC currently sitting in P12. MDC having a bit of a quiet set of races in round 1, what with the fact as we can't find him out on the circuit right now. But MDC did not have the best of races, but I think it just didn't suit him, the car combination and the track. And he'll be looking to improve upon what was a very difficult round number 1. As we can see that Careless One has rejoined the room, and he's currently sitting in P13 in the standings on 10.5 points. And then last but not least, sitting on a single point following 2 retirements in races 2 and 3 is Valave 19. Oh, sorry, Valave I should say, 19 on 1 point. And if Valave is here, which I'm not sure if he is right now, well, fingers crossed that Valave does take part today and is able to gain a few more points, because we know Valave is quite a fast driver once he gets up and running and just doesn't have any major mistakes over the course of the race. But that's the update on our 14 drivers so far, and really the big talking point will be today whether it's going to be Olaf Biscuit who simply runs away with things again, or alternatively whether there's going to be a mix-up in the field this time, given the fact that really it was close in the battle for the win and Dylan Cliff was the one who put the most pressure on Olaf. But start check number 2 is about to get underway. As they all wait for the lights to go out. What you can imagine is here it's the guys on the left-hand side of your picture, or the right-hand side of the grid, who are going to be wanting to get the best possible launch, because they have the defensive line into turn number 1, whether it be in the right-hander. But of course you can make moves around the outside into turn 1, because it is a wide corner, as we previously mentioned, with D having a very good run into the corner there. But you can see how Yaya almost went a little bit wide, but a driver who did go wide there was Olaf Biscuit, who's ended up sending Chronic Opal into the inside wall there. And that's the key thing really that our drivers have got to be wary of here, is that they just need to calm it down a little bit on that opening lap, because the problem is once you lose the guys in front around here, what of it being such a long lap, if you don't manage to nail the first half of the lap together on lap 1, you could find yourself in the region of say 5 seconds down of the rest of the field come the end of lap 1. And with such a limited number of laps, although it is a very long lap, that's going to be a rather painful experience to try and have to regain that time, because you have to drive the wheels off the car. Now flicking back through our order then, whilst we're waiting to get underway. In terms of our main overtaking points then, well, we've got turn 1, you've got turn 3 as well. This is a known overtaking point. But anybody who finds himself on the inside line into turn 3 is going to lose a huge amount of momentum. 4 is a very difficult one to overtake, given how sharp the apex comes up. And you can see in the run through to 6, going through 5 and into 6, it can be an overtaking point if somebody's got 4 very wrong. But then again, you've got an easy opportunity to go defensive through 6, as we can see Eclipse and Klein C1978 right now, having a little bit of shenanigans with one another there and practicing a little bit of battling. Through 7, not really an overtaking point because the run out of 6 is not long enough. Now the run down to 8 is definitely an overtaking point on the brakes, because it is a wide entry point into the corner, albeit there's only really one racing line through there. So again, if there's a battle into that corner, the drivers will lose a lot of time. In the run up through to 10, not really much of an overtaking point because of the downhill curve. And again, you don't really want to find yourself on that inside because you just lose too much momentum. 11 as well, you want to get the best possible run through 11, as Clancy shows us how it's done. Coming out of there at 157 miles per hour off of the exit curb. And the idea being effectively you want to get the best possible run out of 11 so you can go for a move potentially going into 12, albeit not under braking into 12. That's very risky to go for a move into 12, but you'll be able to get past the driver and then hammer it out into 14. And again, 14 is an overtaking point if you get a very strong run through the high-speed chicane compared to the driver ahead of you. And then again, you've got an overtaking point, as we can see, Spalgazan and also Grid battling one another, going through 15 there, and that is an overtaking point. And they're going to be side by side coming along the bridge here. Already we're getting some action when we don't need the action right now. We need it in the race, but this is a good advertisement as they come into a low-speed chicane there, and you can see Spalgazan holding to that inside line. But in return, Great cutting over the curb of the second corner, but you can see that's unsettled the car as he's tried to apply the power there. He's simply gone sideways. He's cut too much of the second curve, the second apex curve there, and that's what's led to a half-second penalty. Going through turn 18 and into 19 then. 19 you can go for a move, but you've got to have such a good run into 19 compared to your opponent out of 18. It's not really advisable. Instead, you want to try and put pressure on, make the opponent make a mistake going through 19 and up into 20, and that's where you can get them under braking, because turn 20 is the widest attacking corner in the circuit. It's got a huge amount of width to it, both on entry and exit, and also it's a wide corner through apex, and it means that if you're able to get down the inside of a driver there, you can really make a move stick, and you won't lose too much time as you've then got the run up towards turn 1 as you commence another lap. Now there are three combinations, of course. This one is the most right-angly of the right-angly variations of Saint-Croix. If you look at any of the variants, you'll find that they do have a number of 90-degree corners here. This one, of course, this is Sector A right now, well not Sector A, I should say, the A layout right now, where you do have this section as well in the C layout. But really, it's only once you get to the bridge that you come across the B layout. Albeit for a very limited period of time, actually. The B layout doesn't really feature in the A layout. This is more of a crisscross with the C layout of this circuit. There's 4 burn zones here, of course. You've got the burn zone on the start-finish straight. You've also got a burn zone which runs all the way, if I remember correctly, across the bridge. You've also got a burn zone which comes up towards the final corner. And I believe we've also got a burn zone, just double checking our race briefing notes for tonight, I believe we've got a burn zone in what is the run up to turn 3, although I'm not 100% sure if that is correct, thinking about it. No, my apologies, I'm wrong about that. We do not have a burn zone there because that would be dangerous for our drivers. We've got a burn zone which comes out of 8 and up, sorry, out of 7 and up into 8, and we've also got the burn zone coming out of 11 down in the run to 12. So we've got 5 burn zones in total, not 4, which means all of our drivers have got ample opportunities to burn penalties, and the ideal place you want to try and burn that penalty is coming out of 7 in the run to 8, because that is the shortest acceleration zone of all the burn zones on this circuit. But of course, if you get a penalty early in that and you've got a more opportune burn zone, you do have to take it the first one. No, the game does not mark the burn zones, unfortunately. Our drivers just have to know them, but we'll call them out for you. So, in terms of the very last burn zone on the circuit there, I don't think we need that many more burn zones. We've got 5 of them as is. So, the first burn zone, you can imagine that Spalgazan has picked up, say, a penalty here. So, he's coming into 19, brakes hard from 19, flicks it in, and then as he comes out the corner here, he'll have to pull over to the left-hand side of the circuit from his perspective and burn the penalty as he comes down the hill into 20. He'll want to burn it before he drops down the slope, however, because that's the racing line. As you go over to the side, and then you've got a burn zone here as you come onto the start-finish straight. So the burn zone is just before the finish line, and then he's got quite a distance to go before he comes up to the next burn zone. So he's going to be coming out of 3, as we can see that Klein C1978 that goes very wide out of 1, pushing the limits, of course. And you can see in terms of the tyres, our drivers have done 3 laps, 2 laps so far, and tyre wear is starting to come in. So we haven't got a burn zone quite yet as he comes up into 4, and Spal's just going to keep throwing us around. So turn 5, flat out through here, then he's going to be coming up into 6. Nailing the brake in there, and then it's going to be 7, and then we're going to have a burn zone coming up literally as he comes out of the corner here. And this will be where the burn zone is. So he comes out of 7, has to burn the penalty. He'll pull over to the right initially to get off racing line. He's going to come through 8 and then up into, 8 and then through 9 and up into 10. So many numbered corners here. At least it's not the green hell. Get nailing 10 very nicely indeed, as we do have a yellow flag up at 11. And we've got our final start check. But as soon as he comes out of 11 here, you can imagine that he would have to pull all the way over to the left-hand side and take a penalty. And then there's the one at the start of the bridge. So we're going to have one more start check, I believe, and then we are going to be good to go for a race. It's lights and away they go for the final start check then, and it looks as though all of our drivers have been able to successfully pull off as they all crowd into one another in the charge down towards turn number 1. And what you can see is as we ride on board with Olaf Biscuit here, to give you an idea of the onboard chaos that essentially happens, everybody going a little bit wide there, although Olaf does make it through relatively safely, and now they charge into 2 and up into 3. As we've got Dylan Cliff, who's going to lead us all across turn 3 to complete the final start check. So qualifying will now be getting underway once the lobby has reset, i.e. everybody has quit the final practice race. And we'll get the announcement from our steward, who is MDC today, so that's MDC 3755. He'll give us the announcement, and everybody will be charging out into the circuit for what is the qualifying session. So 12 minutes as dictated by the timer in the bottom left hand corner of your screen. Target laps, we're expecting probably a pole lap of approximately a 2-minute 32, in the region of that, perhaps even a 2-minute 31. Again, it will come down to whether our drivers are able to burn off as much fuel as humanly possible, but also give themselves the freshest possible tyres when they're going on to that final qualifying lap. As you can see, MDC and Yaya there exchanging places, both drivers experiencing very cold tyres and also very, very loose rear ends. They're throwing those cars around there. You can imagine that they've tuned those cars to have maximum rake, which is where they have the ride height as low as possible at the front, and you can see that as we get those side shots of MDC's car. What you'll note is the rear end of the car is lifted much more than the front end, so it looks as though the car is slanted downwards towards the circuit from rear to front, and that means that he's going to have a lot more rotation in that rear end as he's going through corners, but it will make the car unstable. And when it's on cold tyres in particular, or in the lower gears, especially if he's tuned, say, second gear to be a very punchy acceleration gear, you're going to see the rear end of that car slide quite a bit, because it's trying to deploy all the horsepower whilst at the same time achieve grip on the road surface. And really looking around the field here, we can't really see at the moment anybody going for a long fuel burning session at the moment, although I do say that, in fact, D31 is burning fuel in second gear, just simply coming out of turn number 10 then, and you can imagine that he's absolutely planting the throttle and just applying a little bit of brake. That's about 25% brake there. And we can see the little red marker as well, which would indicate that is the brake input, but the actual brake is the white marker, if I remember correctly. Or no, maybe the other way around, but he's applying approximately 25 to 40% brake, varying it of course, and that's enabling him to burn the fuel out. And you can see his fuel gauge already, he's burnt about 7 to 8% fuel. The idea being, of course, if you've got a lighter car, then you can be faster on the straights because you're carrying less weight in the rear of the car, but also you can be a little bit kinder to the car in terms of your tyres. If you've got less fuel in the car, that means the tyre wear is going to be less, so you can be effectively more aggressive with the tyres. And the first of our drivers then to come around to start an opening qualifying lap will be Olaf Biscuit. Now we're going to follow Olaf Biscuit around, and in fact we are going to jump to the onboard perspective as we clear away some of the data. Well, actually we'll keep all the data on for you. So coming out of the final corner then, absolutely nails it and hits the exit curb perfectly. And we're going to ride on board with the gentleman as he's coming along to start the lap then. So, it's going to be braking down just beyond the 100 board here, absolutely slamming the brakes and tossing the car in there. You can see how much momentum he can carry because of the tune. In third gear, now charging up towards turn 2. We're going to be flat out here and then braking hard at about the 100 metre board. If not a little bit later, coming down to second gear here. Now, has he extended second gear? He has extended second gear. You can see that in the tuning. And now coming through turn 5, staying in second here. And that's how that tune's working out for him. Upshifting to third here. Third's quite a punchy gear in his car, you can see, whereby it's not got too much speed range in there, but then again, the boosting the acceleration in second gear by extending the gear's length means that third gear as a result is a little bit deeper in the maximum speed range. Now coming through 7 and up into 8, he's going to be braking at about the 100 board here, coming down into second gear and chucking the car in with a small trail brake, and then coming out the final corner section there to essentially complete the first half. Now we're braking into 10, going to throw the car across in second gear as well, and now he moves on to the second half of the circuit. So is he going to be flat out into 11 here? A slight lift and then a bigger lift, but he still kept the throttle in, nailing it. And now coming up into fourth gear, and it's going to be up into fifth gear. This is a very good lap so far. Very strong lap indeed as he comes up into fifth then. Now when's he going to brake for the high-speed chicane? Will it be at the 150 board? A 100 board very late on the brakes and staying in fourth gear to steady the car out. Now he's going to not downshift here because it will cost him time to downshift into third, but then he slams on the brakes and comes all the way down to first gear before upshifting to second through apex of the hairpin there. And that's important, he's used that upshift to stabilise the car before coming over into the bridge section now. So starting on the bridge, coming into second gear and now charging up into third. And he'll probably be in fourth gear by the time he gets up to the braking zone for the the low speed chicane I should say. So, and he's going to be braking at the 100 sign there, really stamping hard down the brakes and also shifting down to second, using that additional retardation of 2 downshifts in order to slow the car and bleed off the speed. And now he's going to be going through turn 18. Now will he stay completely flat through here? And let's see how close he can stay to the inside wall. Completely confident in his car as he comes up into the braking for 19, nailing the braking point at approximately 75 metres. And now coming out the corner, that was a very smooth run and only one corner to go. This is a very impressive lap by Olaf Biscuit as he's going to be coming up towards the braking point for turn 20, braking at about 75 metres there, nailing the final corner, nailing the exit, and now he's going to come across the line. And what lap could we be looking at here from Olaf? We are looking at what is a 2:33.6. That is a very strong lap from the British driver there. A very good start. Now what about Archiman? He's coming to the pits because he's wanting to put on a fresh set of tyres. Yaya comes across the line here and is currently 8 tenths down on a 2:34.4 by looks of things. And Eclipse has come across the line on a lap that's even further down, about a 2:34.8. And then we've got McCann, who's gone across the line and he's picked up what is, let's just bring up a little bit of timing information for you. He has set a 2:38.2, so McCann there with a rather nice lap, albeit it's 4.5 seconds off of our provisional pole sitter right now, so there is quite a gap. But again, you can imagine that some of these drivers will be putting in sighting laps here rather than simply trying to nail it on a single lap. And then currently sitting in provisional P6 is De Grid, sitting on a 2:39.2. Approximately a second off of McCann's lap at the moment. Again, we know that Geraint is one of those drivers, and I've actually had it from personal experience of racing against him, where he normally starts off with quite a gradual qualifying lap, but it's his final couple of qualifying laps, if he's got an extended sequence of time, where he absolutely flies. It's almost as if the time comes out of nowhere, and you have to ask yourself the question, well, how on earth did he do that? But speaking on how on earth did he do that, look who's moved up into provisional P3 already with a 2:34.5, and is only a 1/10 off of Yaya right now, and that is the Aussie of Quranic Opal. That 2:34.5 very close at the moment for that provisional second place. And we've got Dylan Cliff not having perhaps the closest run in terms of trying to get on that front row after lap number 1 of qualifying. We're 2:35.0, and you can see already in the bottom left hand corner of your screen in terms of the tyre degradation chart that he has picked up quite a bit of tyre wear on those front tyres, and the rears are also suffering a little bit, and that is the length of the lap here in the number of braking zones. You can imagine that our drivers being very heavy on the brakes here, body moving the brake bias towards the front as well to lock away some of that oversteer from the rear end under braking. It is going to be one of those instances where the tyres may only be good for 1 or 2 laps and they'll feel it after the first lap. And we look further around here and we see that D has hit a 2:35.7 after the first round of qualifying laps and burning a lot of fuel off. You can see that D has already exhausted about 27% of his fuel tank, and that is going to actually pay dividends down the straights here as D is on another flying lap, albeit this is nowhere near the previous lap that D has done. We're going to look around the further field here, and we have got right now Iman, who's going to be coming onto a lap very shortly, and we will switch to Iman as he does begin that lap to talk you through it. You'll see that Olaf Biscuit is into the pits right now, having taken a little bit of time out, essentially, to put on a fresh set of tyres. He's got the fuel down to 64%, and all of our drivers now starting to get their fuel tanks down to the region of 65% as they come around to complete their third lap on the circuit. And now Imman's about to put in a lap, and let's see where this places him. So, as he's coming into turn 1 then, he's cleared himself of traffic, and all of our drivers are asked, for those who are uninitiated, to make sure they give one another ample space on circuit. We're not expecting drivers to use slipstream here because it is against the rules to try and use the slipstream of another car, as is not really found in FI races where everybody's up one another's rear tail in terms of the top split races trying to sniff the slipstream. But suddenly Imman is on a charge in sector 1, setting a sector time that was almost 3/10 faster than our provisional pole lap by Olaf Biscuit right now. So we know that Imman is stronger in sector 1 compared to our provisional pole sitter. A little bit of sideways weave there coming out of 6 and into 7, but he did nail that corner very well, and you can see just how rapidly he's coming out of those corners, carrying so much momentum. 5/10 up now compared to Olaf Biscuit, gaining another 2/10 through sector 2. Now, will he nail the run through 11 up into 12-13 perfectly? Because that's going to be make or break in terms of lap time. You can gain a lot of time, or you can lose a lot through just a simple trio of corners. As he nails turn 10 very well, very smooth by the driver there. Now, coming into 11, you can see an early lift, and it means that he's able to get on the power confidently there as he goes over the camber change of the road surface as he transitions from road surface 1 to 2, as essentially that's where the track limits change. And he's flashing Olaf Biscuit to get out of the way here. He's 8/10 up on Olaf, and he will want Olaf to get out of the way here because he knows that Olaf could impede him, and he's coming through the high-speed chicane then, nails that, but he will be feeling the dirty air of the guy in front of him now with that 2.5 second slipstream zone, and I think that dirty air has cost him a little bit of braking stability into the hairpin there in 14. As he comes over the bridge to 15, Olaf gets out the way, so Olaf could see him coming and did get out of the way in the end. Good sportsmanship there, and now coming through 15 and across the bridge to 16, 17, he's still up. Now, will he be a second up here? Because this has been a phenomenal lap as he crosses the bridge, and he's now a second up, ladies and gentlemen, 146.4 across the bridge. And now coming into the slow speed chicane, he needs to make sure he doesn't cut the opening tarpaul in apex, and he nails that, but he misses the apex and he clips the wall, and that lap is in tatters for Imman after what was a very promising lap, his first qualifying lap really of the session. And now Imman's got to do it all again, and I think he's actually going to have to do one more lap on worn tyres, because we've only got a couple, well, we've got less than 2 minutes remaining of this session, but that is a disaster for Imman, and he'll want to nail this final qualifying lap. And I think a lot of our drivers right now are getting into the sort of train of thought where they're setting up to go for that final lap here if they haven't really had a good lap so far. And the first driver who's going to be crossing the line to start their final qualifying lap will be Yaya777. I should say Yaya from now on, of course, where he's going to be coming across here. So he's had his out lap, and now what can Yaya do in terms of responding to get on that front row? Because he's currently sitting 8/10 of a second down on the pole sitter and only a 10th down on our P2 driver at the moment, Dylan Cliff. As he's coming through then, with a minute to go, of course, all of our drivers are bunching up in the final couple of sectors. Not bunching up to get in that slipstream trail, but in terms of when they come across the line at the last possible second with the least amount of fuel. So they've all stamped on the brakes, and they've all decided to try and burn as much fuel as possible. But Yaya right now improving, albeit not the fastest driver on circuit, as we see Dylan Cliff comes into the pits. Now that means Dylan is not going to have any more qualifying laps. So I think Dylan thinks he's hit his peak in terms of setting a 2:34.3. With only 12 minutes in this qualifying session, of course, I think Dylan will be wondering to himself here why he pitted, because he's not going to be able to get another lap in. And we can see that Yaya is still charging through and still setting blue sectors for himself, which means he's improving. Now coming up into what is turn 10 for the 5th time of asking. Coming out there, he doesn't quite extend the full width of the circuit, and we've only got a couple more minutes to go. Will all of our drivers who are coming through the final corner make it onto the final qualifying lap? We know Dylan's qualifying session is over, so he's going to be vulnerable to losing out. And hold on a second, I think as we come down, we've got we had one driver in the wall there, and I think KLS1 does not make it across the line, which means KLS does not start one more qualifying lap. And I'm not sure if McCann made it across in time. I think he just about made it across there with this 12-minute qualifying session, but we do have one driver who's got it completely wrong, parked up in the Rothman's car, and we're just trying to find out who that is. That is Garrett, who's going to be starting in P12 as his highest now, having got it wrong. That is a disaster from Garrett. That is not good at all. And really, in terms of who could be improving, we've got Yaya leading the field in terms of being on that final qualifying lap. Not even a 10th up on his previous time, so Yaya not improving significantly here. This may just give him a bit more security in that P3 position, but I don't think it's going to give him that confidence to think he can get on that front row. Of course, he's got one more sector to go after turn 18, and he could pick up some time just simply running through that final sector. So coming for 18 and into 19 now, he's going to be charging down the brakes, and he's gained a tiny bit. Well, he hasn't gained yet. I think he's lost a bit more time, and he gets it all sorts of handy and all over the place there coming out of 19. You could see that the car just didn't want to settle, and he didn't feel confident to get on the power, so he actually had to throw the car back towards the inside of the circuit there. And now through 20, nailing that corner relatively well. Now, is this going to be an improvement for the British driver as he comes across the line? And it is an improvement by 5 tenths, so he lost a lot of time in the final sector, but he's nailed that up into provisional P2. And coming across the line is Imman, and Imman sets the pole lap of a 2:32.2. That is phenomenal. Now, will Olaf respond here? He is on his best overall as he comes across the line then. Is this going to be a 2:31 from Olaf? Not quite, but he's just hit to provisional pole by 1,000th over Imman. Imman must be raging right now, and Olaf must be smirking to himself thinking, well, I've done my job. Now that's a perfect one there, and I don't think anybody else is really improving, as Chronic Opal has parked off circuit, as has Elite Eclipse. And we've also, well, we've got Mikan. Mikan is our final driver right now, running around, I believe. But everybody else seems to have come off of a qualifying lap. Alternatively, they've wrapped up and they're not improving at a rapid rate here. But Mikan just about made it across the line from what I'm hearing. And, well, we're going to see if he improves from his P6. So he's currently sitting on a 2:34.9. And we do also have a driver who's coming across the line. That's Cosmic Esports' Clancy 1978. Let's see how he does from a 2:35.0 to a 2:34.2. And that moves him up into P4. Now, how will Mikan do? He is the final driver, of course, on that lap, in terms of the final qualifying lap. And he's got some heavily worn rear left tyres there. And I think, well, his rear tyres in general, I should say, he's going to come across the line. And it's not an improvement for the Dutch driver. So, after qualifying, ladies and gentlemen, your pole sitter is Olaf Biscuit from the United Kingdom with 2:32.2. Only 1,000th ahead of Ark Imman with a 2:32.205, and then it is a sizable gap to P3 where Yaya with that 2:34.0 is just pipping Clancy 1978 to P3. These two drivers line up with Clancy only a further quarter of a second down, and then it's a 10th to Dylan Cliff in P5 from Ireland, and then the Australian driver Chronic Opal in P6 with a further 2 tenths down. The full row of the grid will be started by Mikan, the Dutchman not improving on his final lap, of course, and alongside him his fellow Dutchman of Eclipse. And then on the 5th row, we'll have Spalgazan with that rather brilliant lap for his own personal efforts there, which has made him into, well, has moved him into that top 10. And then we've got D31 there sitting on that 2:35.7. And then we've got Caliso1 in P11. We've got Garrett in P12. And I think MDC was also somewhere in there, but he left the trackside surface in order to set up the grids, so we'll have to double check where MDC qualified, but those are your standings. A very tight qualifying session for the pole, but it was quite open in terms of overall lap time. We haven't really had too many drivers too close in terms of lap time. Now, of course, lap time being spread out here is noticeable because of the fact that this is such a long circuit. So whereas on the shorter circuit we saw last week at Autodrome Largo Maggiore, we had drivers who were, say, within 1 to 2 tenths of one another, here, that 1 to 2 tenths evolves into more about half a second in terms of closeness, if you will. But the flip side of that kind, of course, is that there may be drivers who just simply feel better through certain sectors. And we are seeing a spread of lap times here, which I don't think it means that it's going to cause the field to spread out rapidly after lap 1. But I think we are going to see our drivers spread out significantly in terms of we're going to have multiple packs round on circuit, and they're going to be fighting in amongst another for positions. But really now it's waiting for race number 1 to get underway. But McCann's lap there not really coming in handy for the Dutchman in all honesty, but the massive improvement was from, of course, Imman, where he just simply seemed to shot up and probably thought he had pole just to be pipped by that 1,000th, the smallest of margins to be pipped by. As we switch back to the circuit cameras here, as we are waiting for the race to get underway. And our stewards are just getting things set up at the moment, folks. So I wouldn't recommend going anywhere. You've probably got less than 2 minutes before we get underway with race number 1. But Olav will be happy that he's starting on pole and starting with that inside line. Because, of course, all of our drivers here in identical machinery in terms of the engine power they've got available to them and the weight available to them in the car. But of course, all our drivers will tune their cars differently. Some of them will tune their cars probably for the opening half of the circuit, where you've got those smaller acceleration zones and the focus is on maintaining not just your apex speed, but also getting on the accelerator as soon as possible coming out of the right angle corners. Whereas the second half of the circuit, so sector 4 onwards, is all about speed and maintaining high apex speeds through the high speed corners, albeit you do have that one rather low speed chicane of turns 16 and 17 to worry about. And we are hearing that a couple of the teams down in the paddock right now are in a little bit of arms with regards to obstructions on laps. Of course, we didn't get to see all that on the replay cameras in terms of qualifying, because we're focused on individual laps. But it does seem as though some drivers did impede one another, but things are settling down now and everybody's trying to get into the mental position of just being ready for the race. Because in the eyes of a number of drivers here, if you didn't have the best qualifying session, it's not all over. You've got 3 races to try and get as many points as possible. The format here for the uninitiated is that race 1's starting positions will be determined by the qualifying session. Race 2's starting positions will be determined by the finishing positions in race 1, where if you finish first in race 1, you start on pole in race 2, and it's the same thing for race 3. The finishing positions of race 2 will determine where you start for race 3. If you finish first in race 2, you start on pole once again in race number 3. But everybody has definitely settled down now. We've got Iman just making a little bit of a patrol around the circuit there, a little bit of a parade. We've got Spalgazin, of course, practicing, and a number of drivers here will also be practicing their race starts, and Spalgazin's going to give us an example here. He's going to be revving the car up with the handbrake on, lowering the power down, not using traction control here. Now, this is important to note, he's not using traction control, because the thing about traction control is it does enable you to essentially cut away some of the wheel spin, but in return, every time you go for an upshift with traction control enabled, it will delay the acceleration of the car. As you can see there, that one driver had to take evasive action, and that was Eclipse taking evasive action, thinking that Spalgazin would have been running a bit faster on the circuit there. But he's choosing to run his race start without traction control, which if he can nail the RPM and match it to the wheels, that will mean that he can have a much faster start compared to other drivers around on the circuit. And welcome to Martin in the chat, who I believe is Eclipse. And good luck to all of our drivers, of course, those of you tuning in who are racing tonight. And also those of you who are not tuning in, good luck to you as well. We're looking forward to some fantastic racing. And hello to Razurin Rikiza. We're still just waiting a little bit at the moment. I think I should have just taken an extra minute. Perhaps they're already making some notes of what's happening in qualifying. We're just waiting here. Hold on, ladies and gentlemen. I'm about to get an announcement, I think. I'm being told in my ear right now. Is it going to be race 1 underway? It is race 1. I've just had confirmation, ladies and gentlemen. So race 1 is about to get underway. And, well, it's going to be 4 laps. Let's see what happens over the sprint race distance. Will Olaf Biscuit hold on, or will we see a surprise in the opening lap, or indeed over the course of the distance? And hello there, Mr. Funky. And Pingo as well. I don't think I said hello to you earlier. Alrighty, so our time of day has changed. All of our drivers will need to ready up. But of course, we moved on from the qualifying time of day now to a little bit later on in the day. So it was a nice early morning. We had the sunrise, of course, running over the circuit, which made it a little bit difficult to see some of our braking points, particularly into turn 1. And now we've moved to 20 to 10 in the morning. The clouds have come over a little bit. It's a bit overcast now, no sunlight as such, which is a bit unfortunate because we do love a bit of sun. But all of our drivers will be readying up. And Chronic Opal is going to do us the honours of putting the car out on circuits. That way we can follow them with the camera. Because for those uninitiated, what happens is if I'm in spectator mode and I'm trying to look at a car that's sat in the pits, it can cause the camera to glitch out and we'll miss all the racing action. And we don't want to do that, of course. We don't want to miss the craziness. But all of our drivers here running the Porsche 962, we've got the countdown, ladies and gentlemen. So 5 seconds before race number 1 gets underway. Place your bets now. Who's going to win? Alright then, so lining up on the left-hand side will be Olaf Biscuit, and on the right is Inman, who's going to be in front as they come into turn number 3 and out of it, of course. Further back, we've got Yaya and Clancy and Dylan Cliff, all wanting to make up ground. So 5 red lights coming up. That's 2, 3, 4, 5. And it's lights out and away they go. And all of our drivers here getting relatively good starts. A bit of wheel spin further back as Iman has had a decent start, but Olaf has pipped him in terms of the start there. And as they all charge up in towards turn number 1 for the first time of asking, you can see that it's too wide for most of our drivers here, showing one another a good amount of space. But Iman going off already and getting it horrifically wrong and coming back across the circuit there. And that is a disaster for Iman, but it does release Olaf here as they all charge up into turn number 3. And Krynik Opel going to the inside of Dylan into 3, and Eclipse doing the same against Garrett. As you can see, Clancy and also McCann getting it all sorts of wrong coming out of turn number 3, and there was an incident there. But we are going to have to look back at what happened to our second place man. As you can see, they're going too wide side by side. It's like Noah's Ark here coming up into turn number 6, and as they're coming out of the corner here, you have got Spalgazm being pressed by D, as D is trying to hold to the inside here. And as they come out of 7, D has moved up into P8. Now up front, meanwhile, Olaf is not able to pull away from Yaya here, and Yaya is chasing after him, but Dylan is also up into P3. He's got back past Krynik Opel. We didn't see that, but we've got Garrett up into P5 as well, and we've got Eclipse holding on to P6 right now as MDC is chasing after him. So these guys have spread out a little bit, and now it's D who's holding up the pack a little bit in terms of P8, holding up Spalgazm as they're coming through turn number 11. Now, charging down into turn number 12 for the first time. What you can imagine is here that Yaya is going to be sizing up Olaf and looking for an opportunity, but I don't think he's going to go for a move early here. It would be very adventurous for our drivers to go for a move on lap number 1 into the high-speed chicane. As we can see, a number of our drivers, they're getting caught out by the dirty air, and Garrett and Eclipse will both be picking up limits penalties there for the fact they run wide. Alternatively, they may have been able to avoid the penalties by simply contacting the wall and slamming on the brakes, and I think they have there. But we can see that as a result, MDC now up into P5, and MDC, one of our drivers who did have the best of qualifying runs, finding his form in race number 1 so far, as they're all coming across the bridge here. And we can see further back in your picture that whilst D's up into P7, Eclipse now down into P9, and KLS1 moving up into P10 and still charging. As in the rear of your shot, we've got Clancy looking for a move on KLS1 initially into the low speed chicane, just simply trying to intimidate and show his intentions. And as they come around now, we've got Imam right at the back of the pack, and coming up into turn number 19 then, we've got Olaf just leading Yaya and also Dylan Cliff, and Cliff is not able to pull away from Opel, but these 4 running away from the rest of the field as D goes for a move on the inside of 19 against Garrett, and Garrett goes into the wall and gets hit on the rear by Spalgazm. And as they all come down charging into turn number 20, it's going to be 3 wide, breaking back into 2 wide here, and they're all settling down as they come through. So after 1 lap, it is Olaf Biscuit leading on Yaya, followed by Dylan Cliff, followed by Krynik Opel, followed by what is currently D31, as they're going to be 3 wide, come up into turn number 1, and you can see MDC's on the outside of this 3 wide adventure. And as they all charge in here, it looks as though Garrett tried to settle back in, but Spalgazm wants to get back in that fight there, and Eclipse right on the rear of Spalgazm right now, but Garrett is going to have that inside line up into turn number 3, but Eclipse is being adventurous on the brakes here. He looks out initially, but then decides better of it. It's cost him a lot of momentum as a result, and you could see that as a result of that, Clancy went right up into the rear end, and he's gone off as a result at turn number 4. It's a disaster for Clancy then, as he loses a lot of momentum, and things are just simply settling down back into their natural order, as it's very hard to now overtake through this set of corners until you come up into turn number 8. And as they all come up into turn 8 then, we can see hold on a second, we've got Yaya, I think, who's burning a bit of a penalty there, and that as a result has meant he's dropped down to P3, body through cutting at turn number 7. And meanwhile, MDC up into P5 right now after Garrett has gone off, and Garrett has gone off again, coming out of 8 and up into 9 and 10, and he's spun out. That is very unfortunate for the German driver there, as they're now coming up through the end of the first half of the lap, and you can see that D is back up into P6 and essentially holding everybody behind him up, as Spalgazm gets a better run out of turn number 11, and now he's going to go for the charge down into turn number 12 and 13. But will he go for a move here? It's going to be brave if he goes for it, and I think he's going to settle in and try and nail the braking. As we look further up front then, And as we look up front, we can see that Biscuit has started to pull away from Cliff, and Yaya is chasing after him. Yaya will want to get back into that P2, and then MDC has got a nice comfortable gap of 1.2 seconds on D, who is battling with Spalgazan as they come out of the hairpin there. Now they're coming onto the bridge, and you can see in the rear of your shot Eclipse going for an adventurous move on McCann, but McCann is saying, well, I'm just going to hold on to the racing line here, Eclipse. You're not going to have any opportunity to make the corner onto the bridge otherwise, and it means McCann is holding on to P8 right now. Now, whilst we have got an opportune moment here, we are going to take a look back at what happened to Iman on that opening lap going through turn number 1. And it looks as though he had a good run into the first corner here, but he just went wide. And I think he just went out onto the grass and got it wrong, tried to apply the power. Yep, the car snapped on him, and he then drifted across traffic. And, well, fortunately, his car ghosted there. Otherwise, that could have been a disaster for him. But meanwhile, looking up front then, we can see that Biscuit is pulling away a little bit at the moment, having a comfortable gap. There's been no change in our top 4. We've still got D and P6 as they're coming to the end of lap number 2. And D right now really doing a great job of just simply holding on to P6. And D seems to be planting the car very well, and Spalgazan has got to react. But in return, he's gained on MDC significantly here, and MDC is going to be feeling a bit of pressure. The British driver, having had a good opening half to this race, is now starting to fall back into the clutches in the midfield. And I think what he's going to be hoping for here is that Spalgazan and D battle one another, and they have, and Spalgazan seems to have gone into the rear end and then T-boned D, but I think D was already halfway round when he went into him. We're going to need to take a look on board of what happened there from Spalgazan's perspective in a second, but you can see that Spalgazan now has essentially cleared himself with D, but in return as McCann, a rather charging Dutchman, chasing up his rear end, and Spalgazan is feeling the pressure, but McCann looking to the outside, initially coming out of 4 and into 5 and 6, then decides better of it because he knows he can't carry as much momentum if he goes to the wide, and McCann gets the snap oversteer coming out of 6 there, and it's a disaster for the Dutchman, dropping him down. All the drivers here seem just to feel a bit of pressure as they're now all coming out of turn number 7 and charging down towards 8. That was an absolute disaster for 2 drivers back to back, and Kleinsee going for the move here, an adventurous move into 8 on KLS1, and then backing out at the last moment. I think KLS1 is really struggling here because he's gone wide into 9. He will have the inside line into 10, but Kleinsee trying to hold around the outside, and you never do that into turn number 10, but he's done it and he's made it work. The Austrian driver trying to make up for lost time. And all the way at the back at the moment, we do have Guret, but we can see that KLS1 is trying to get back already, and I think that actually Kleinsee... Oh, no, hold on a second. What on earth was happening at Iman and D there? It seems there was a bit of a squeeze against the wall, and one of them ended up on the grass there, and KLS1 has settled back in behind Kleinsee here, but trying to get the charge done into turn 14 then, and I don't think it's going to work out, as we can see that one of our drivers up ahead has picked up a significant penalty, and I think that's Iman for cutting across the high-speed chicane there, and that is a disaster for Iman, because now he's going to lose a lot of ground and drop all the way down to P10 as Kleinsee defends the inside here, coming onto the bridge, and D has gone wide, and D is into the wall at the bridge. Well, that is absolutely mad. And hold on a second, looking at Yaya, Yaya has got ahead of Dylan Cliff. Now, where has that happened out on circuit? Let's double check that, ladies and gentlemen. So Yaya got it done before across the bridge. He must have got that done across the bridge, but it means that he is ahead of these guys right now. We're doing the straight run down into turn number 16, and really he's trying to charge after Olaf now, who's comfortably sitting at 1.8 seconds ahead of these guys, and I think can afford to just take a little bit of pressure off himself, albeit he won't want to let these guys get too close as they come into the final lap of the opening race then. Now further back you can see that Spalgazan has cleared MDC, he has got past the British driver here, well the Brit has got past the Brit we should say, and I think that's happened probably across the bridge given the fact that the gap has opened up so much, and MDC still holding on to P6 as they come onto the final lap then, Eclipse up into that P7, and McCann going immediately defensive, taking the inside line into 1 before snapping back to the outside, and I think just to try and break the toe, as we can see behind, Kleinsee going for the mother of all lunges into turn number 1 and making that work there, but in return Iman has gained the momentum, and I think he got that on cutback effectively. So what we're going to see as they come down into turn number 1 then, Kleinsee on your right of picture, and Kleinsee goes in with a very, very deep brake, and then you can see that Iman has just simply said, well, you've gone a bit deep, I'll simply cut back in behind you, and it's worked out for the driver there, the Austrian, just going a bit too far, and Iman now trying to charge after McCann, who goes deep into 6. Now coming up in the centre, Iman's going to have that inside line, and he'll know that he'll be able to force McCann into a position where he's compromised into the corner there, because he can take that natural racing line, and it means he's now up into P8 and charging after P7. And I think Iman's finally hitting his stride, albeit it's been a very rough race for the British driver all the way through until this final lap, but the momentum is now on his side, as we can see McCann seems to be losing more and more ground to the Austrian behind him here, and I think it's only a matter of time before Kleinsee goes goes for a move. Now, will it be into 11? We're not going to see it into 11, I don't think. I think it's going to be in the run down to 14 if Kleinse can nail things. Now, up front, meanwhile, I should point out that Olaf Biscuit has dropped a second to Yaya. Now, I think that might be for a mistake, given the fact that if it was a penalty, it would have been more than that. But meanwhile, behind them, you've got Dylan Cliff, who is defending hard against Chronic Opal. The Australian simply putting more and more pressure on the Irishman as they're coming onto the bridge now. And you can see that Dylan getting a bit of snap oversteer there coming onto the bridge. And I think he's just been able to keep it under control. And he'll be grateful for the fact he's got a nice amount of slipstream off of Yaya in front of him, which keeps him safe on the run down into the slow speed chicane here. But in return, that means if Opal can nail things, he's going to have a really good run going up into the final corner. Further back, meanwhile, we can see that Spalgazan currently in P5 has not had the best of runs onto the bridge. And MDC is trying to get closer and closer, but not able to make a move at the moment. But Lionheart and Eclipse cutting very tight there to the tarpaulin entry point of the chicane. And as MDC gets it all sorts of wrong and has to lift out the throttle, snap oversteer in effect there. And well, that's going to cost MDC a place or two. And will he be able to hold on to P7? Well, coming into the final corner then, your race winner, ladies and gentlemen, on race number 1 will be Olaf Biscuit from the United Kingdom. And behind him will be Yaya, followed by Dylan Cliff, and then Chronic Opal in the battle for P1 to 4. Spalgazan, I think, is going to be your winner in the top 5 in terms of holding on to 5th place. As we can see behind him, Eclipse coming through as well. Spalgazan nailing that final corner. MDC going very wide there out of the final corner. So Spalgazan coming home in P5, Eclipse in P6, Iman in P7, McCann in P8, MDC in P9, and then Kleinse in P10. I think MDC just got pushed wide there in terms of his position on circuit. Careless 1 coming home in P11. Garrett, who's going to be coming across the line here in a rather lonely P12, but he can make up for that in the next race, I'm sure of that. And then last but not least of our running drivers in race number 1 is D31 from the Netherlands. As he weaves his way across the line there. Oh, what a cracking opener of a race. And as we can see, your race winner, ladies and gentlemen, Olaf Biscuit. Now, as we take a look at our final standings, then it is worth noting that Olaf did not have the fastest lap in this race. It went to Yaya, who picked up a 2:33.7. So laps are actually quite close to the qualifying times here in terms of fastest lap. And I think what it is for Yaya right now, in his mind, whilst Olaf ran a very good race, he knows that if he can nail the start and avoid any of the carnage of turn 1 and turn 3, he will be able to chase Olaf down over the course of the next race. And it may not be that he goes for potentially a move on Olaf in race 2. Perhaps he'll just sit there, but he'll want to size up Olaf for the final race in particular, where it's the 7-lapper. Because on those longer races, little mistakes can creep in, and that pressure can really start to build over the longer race distance. But then again, credit to all of our drivers here for making it through after race number 1. A little bit of a surprise from Iman. That was a disastrous start for him, but he was able to recover to P7 in the end. But I think it was an absolute charger of a race for Iman. And really, it was that final lap where you could see that Iman just simply nailed everything and started to push his way through the field. So expect him to come charging up through the field in race number 2. Eclipse picking up a very good result there of a P6, and Spalgazan is really the highlight in creeping into that top 5. We thought it was going to be MDC, but MDC just started to fall off on the second half of the race after running a really good opening half of the race in that P5. And Kleinse, a bit of a shock there down in P10. We'd expect Kleinse to be a little bit further up, but again, that's only one race. We've got 2 more to go and plenty more action on the table for you, ladies and gentlemen. And really, let me know in your opinion, what was the highlight of that race. I appreciate we weren't able to catch all of it. I haven't been able to double check what happened with regards to D and Spalgazan. I think for Spalgazan, what may have happened was that D went out onto the grass out of turn 1, and he lost control of the car. And because Spalgazan was running so close and didn't have time to react, I think D's rear end started to snap oversteer. And as the rear end started to rotate his car clockwise by about, say, 45 degrees, I think there might have been a little bit of contact from Spalgazan, which he couldn't have prevented because he was so close in racing with D. And then as a result, he may have gone into D and rotated him further. But you could see that Spalgazan didn't mean to, because he immediately stamped on the brakes to prevent rotating D anymore. And that meant that both drivers finished in their positions. And it was unfortunate for D. It wasn't a great ending to his race. But in return, Spalgazan was able to do very well despite what he went through there. We've just got to remind our race steward to save the replay. But what a cracking opener. As I say, I think there's a number of stories that need to be told in this one, and we'll have to keep our eyes on what happens in race number 2, because I think, we're expecting a bit of a shock at some point in races 2 or 3. As we can see, Karts is now practicing his race start, and it's worth noting in terms of when you see in that bottom left-hand corner the rectangles around the rear tyres glowing red, what that means is he's essentially putting too much power through the wheels and they haven't got as much traction as they need to deploy all that power, so they're spinning instead, and that is introducing excessive tyre wear in the wheels. This is going to pull off again here, practicing multiple starts, but you can see that if he can nail the RPM on that initial build-up when he starts to release the handbrake, the car does seem to pull off a lot better by comparison with if you've got traction control on. And we're just going to take a brief sip of water, and in terms of the next race being underway, ladies and gentlemen, give it probably about 2-3 minutes and we'll expect race number 2, if not sooner. So it's a good time if you need to quickly pop to the bathroom, alternatively grab yourself a glass of water, as we're just about to, as Eclipse decides to slide off into the wall out of turn 1 there, showing us his Tokyo Drift credentials. Probably one of the B drivers there for Tokyo Drift, but if he improves, you never know. But jokes aside, good credit to Eclipse for the fact that in race number 1, keeping in mind, ladies and gentlemen, this is the first time that Eclipse has raced in GTSRL with wheel and pedals, having a good result in race number 1, and we'll keep our eyes on Eclipse as he moves into race number 2. Now, it's also worth noting that tyre wear wasn't a major factor over the course of the first race. There was a small tyre wear factor in lap number 4, but really, in terms of the pit stops here, the pit stop length for race number 3 is going to be about 8 seconds if you take tyres on, and we'll talk more about that as we come into race number 3. So I believe what we're hearing with regards to what you saw between Iman and Kleinsee when they were coming down, I think it was on the penultimate, if not the final lap, as they were coming down the run of 11 into turns 12 and 13, where you saw essentially they both seemed to wiggle out from the wall at the same time, was there seemed to be a little bit of squeezing into the wall on the right hand side, and it wasn't intentional, it was just simply cars not being given width. Now, we're not going to point out fingers or anything on those lines, but I think it was Kleinsee who was up against the wall and hit the grass, which is just, there's a tiny slab of grass just before you get to that wall, and if you put a wheel on that and then try to hold onto the steering and apply the throttle, it just simply causes the car to wiggle out, and that's what happened there. It's unfortunate, but our drivers coming down into turn 12 do have to get themselves into an order, because there's only one line through 12, and if you do go for a move into 12 on the inside, it's difficult to do. You can do it, but the amount of momentum you rob of both yourself and the driver behind you means that effectively you as a pair are compromised going into 14 compared to the guy behind the pair of you. So if you've got two drivers behind you, you can lose multiple places by being aggressive into 12. And what I'm talking about, see on the left hand side of your camera, there's that patch of grass just before the barrier. That's where I think Kleinsee was squeezed into the wall, albeit of course it was unfortunate, but they were able to keep their cars safe and sound in the end, as Karts decides to go for a little bit of a picnic across 13. And we've had a time of day change, and I think now we are about to get underway with another race. So now we've moved to the afternoon, so the sun's back out. It's now 20 past 1, and of course, this is something that our drivers have to consider. They will have practiced, a number of drivers will have practiced running their cars in multiple different weather conditions. And it's important because you should not get used to using shadows or certain bits of weather furniture, if you will, to determine braking points, acceleration points. You always want to use permanent fixtures out on the circuit. So for example, where a lamp column is, where a braking board is, where there's a change of colour in the safety barrier, those things are permanent. They will not change across the course of a day. Whereas a shadow, where somebody might be standing or where a lamp column casts a shadow across the circuit, that's not an ideal braking point marker, simply because that will disappear when we switch to cloudy conditions, and that's one of the things that can catch drivers out. Now we have got KLS1 who's rejoined at the moment. He's having some connectivity issues in joining tonight's race. He was experiencing a little bit of latency in race number 1, albeit not too harmful, but he's just doing a restart of his internet, his router and his console to try and get rid of that excess latency, because it can be difficult when you are a driver with a low ping up against a driver with a very high ping, and as a result what that can effectively mean is a ping being the response rate between yourself and the server in terms of your internet connection, as Yaya and Eclipse here are running around nose to tail here. And I think Yaya's going to use this to get used to an attacking position on a driver as he's coming out of 4 and into 5 here. You can see Eclipse going wide, but will be on the inside effectively for 6. Both of the drivers battling here, and Yaya trying to go around the outside, but going a little bit out onto the grass, and then Eclipse just simply backing out of it there, and Yaya flashing his lights to say thank you as he returns back to the garage. And now we've got Dylan Cliff coming through. The key thing as well with regards to, as we can see Dylan Cliff going wide out of 7 there and trying to use the full track limits, the thing that our drivers have to get used to as well is the fact that as you go deeper and deeper into these races, you do start to feel a little bit of exhaustion. As Dylan goes very, very sideways through 8 there, something you don't ideally want to do. I think he's showing off a little bit for the cameras right now, Dylan. Great driver, of course, we've seen a lot from Dylan so far. Smalkasm practicing his race start out of turn 1 and in the run up to turn 3. Okay, and we've just had confirmation, ladies and gentlemen. We have got race number 2. We're about to get underway. Alright, ladies and gentlemen, the countdown has been started. So place your bets. Who's going to win race number 2? Will it be Olaf Biscuit, or will we see a different race winner? So on your left, it'll be Olaf Biscuit from the United Kingdom. On your right, it'll be Yaya from the United Kingdom as well. Behind them, 2 very fast drivers in Dylan Cliff and Chronic Opal, and Sparrowgasson in P5. Watch out for him, and Iman in P7, who will be looking to make up a huge amount of ground on this opening lap. 5 red lights, it's lights out and away they go. And again, a good start by Olaf Biscuit, but you can already see Iman getting a very strong start on the opening portion of the starting sequence and charging up into, well, it's P8 at the moment, but he's on the inside into turn 1, and Yaya going very wide into turn 1, and Biscuit just taking that inside line. There is a lot of contact coming out of turn 1 and now through 2 and into 3, and I think we're going to need to have a look back at what's happened there. As charging up into turn 3 then, we can see that Dylan Cliff was originally on the outside as Olaf defends the inside, and Dylan has got it done around the outside, and Yaya getting very unstable on the acceleration out of 3 and coming into 4. Iman wide there, but Iman all the way up into P3 already. That is a huge gain on lap 1, and I mean, we haven't even completed 2 sectors yet. He's up into P3 and charging, and the one who's lost out a bit is Olaf, but the one who lost out massively right now is, as we look down through the field, and they're coming all charging through into turn number 8 and out of it. Turn number 7 and out of it, we can see that Yaya has lost tremendously down to P6 as Garrett is going to the inside into 8 right now, holding on to that P8 as he's coming through here, getting a little bit unstable on exit and going through 9 and up into 10. He'll surely go defensive here if he needs to, but otherwise McCann hasn't really got a move going on here, but he will try and get onto that inside for 11. So as they come across 11 then and now down onto the fastest section of the circuit, you can see that Cliff is running away a little bit, only 4 attempts up, but there is a huge slipstream train from P1 all the way down to P6, and you can see they're all trying to get into that slipstream train in order to get as much speed as possible. And well, hold on a second, I think we've got Olaf looking to the inside here, defending to the inside against Iman, who had a huge run into the high-speed chicane. I think Iman's going to go for a move on the inside, and indeed he's got it on the brakes, he's gone very deep on the brakes, and I think, hold on a second, in the rear of your picture, Yaya and MDC getting it all sorts of wrong coming out of the hairpin, but keeping it collected. But Iman is on a charge and up into P2 as they come onto the bridge then, and you can see MDC has lost out a bit, and Garrett is coming onto the back of this chase for P1, and well, up front we can see that Olaf Biscuit and Iman are battling once again, and Biscuit's taken to the inside, but he's backed out of it. I think that's sensible, and we've got Yaya now coming through and Spalgasm behind him, and somebody's gone very deep. That was Garrett going very deep, feeling a bit of pressure there as KLS1 has got up into P7, and McCann has got past Garrett to get up into P8, and behind them D has managed to get into P10 against Kleinsee. Kleinsee not really having the best of starts here once again, and Chronic Opal right behind him, and as they all come into 9 19 then, under braking. Is D going to hold on here or be attacked on the inside? He's able to hold on. All of our drivers getting a good run out of turn 19. And now one more corner to go. As we can see, Iman looking initially to the inside to try and intimidate Cliff, but Cliff is having none of it. So after one lap, ladies and gentlemen, it is going to be the Irishman of Dylan Cliff who's being attacked already in the charge down to turn 1. So we're going to stay with this just a little bit longer if you don't mind, as Iman looks to the inside, and I think he's going to have it here. No, he doesn't. He backs out of it, so he's in P2, then Olaf Biscuit in P3, then Yaya in P4, Spalgazin in P5, MDC in P6, McCann in P7, as KLS1 has got it horrifically wrong, and Chronic Opal's also spun out of turn 1. That is an absolute disaster, and now that means the Australian is all the way down the field, as D is in P10, as Gret's moved up into P8, Kleinsey in P9, and Kleinsey almost getting it wrong out of P3 there. And KLS1 up into P11 and Eclipse in P12, and then Opal all the way down in P13. And Iman is up. Well, whilst that was happening, ladies and gentlemen, Iman is now up into P1. We did not see that, so we're going to take a look back on camera and see how he did it. And I think he just went round the outside into free. Cliff tried to hold it as much as possible, but experienced some snap oversteer coming out the corner, and that meant that Iman just had the momentum on Dylan. And now will he be able to run away? Theoretically, he's the fastest driver so far out on the circuit, competing with Biscuit for that fastest lap in the qualifying session, of course, but they were so close together. Those two are the ones to beat. As we can see, MDC going wide, and he's got to try and gradually get that back onto circuit because it's going to snap on him, and he returns right into the path of Kleinsey as he now goes alongside Kleinsey coming into 11, and I think the Austrian here is going to have the run, and really MDC just needs to calm it down a little bit here as they're going to go side by side in the run down into 12, but he'll tuck in surely, and MDC does tuck in. He knows there's no move on into 12. That would be absolutely tantamount to suicide into 12, and as he comes through, collecting it together, all our drivers making it through safely, and under braking, no change for our pack of 4, as Spalgazin has picked up a penalty for cutting across the high-speed chicane, so he has dropped down into what is effectively a fight for P5. And on the rear of your picture, ladies and gentlemen, we've got MDC spinning out all over the place. What has happened to the British driver there, as he's gone all sorts of wrong out of the hairpin? So coming up into the hairpin in P8. Now, has he just got it wrong on powers? He's gone to the inside, contacted with Kleinsey there, and he's simply tried to get on the power, and he's experienced snap oversteer. He had Gret on his inside, who seems to go wrong. Gret took evasive action, and the two collided there, but I think that was both drivers getting a bit too aggressive on the power, and then simply touching one another up into the walls and whatnot. But still, up in front is Iman leading on Cliff, followed by Biscuit and Yaya, and these four are just simply setting into a rhythm right now. But up into P5, having got past Spalgazin, is McCann. Now, did we see that happen in the high-speed chicane? Yes, well, not in the high-speed, in the low-speed chicane. He got it done under braking into the into the low-speed chicane. I'm going to stop saying the high-speed if it kills me. And as they come through then into the next lap, you can see that right now McCann is just simply pulling away. He's holding on to P5, pulling over to the inside of the circuit initially to break a little bit of the distance toe, and then settling back down. And meanwhile, in the rear of your picture, we've got D, who's charging after this pack in P8 right now, and there's quite a gap to Gret in P9, and then KLS1 is up into the top 10 in P10. A 5.7 second lead over P11. And there's not really much else happening right now. While I say that, you've got MDC all over the back of Eclipse like a bad rash, charging like an absolute rabid dog for positions right now. And he's going to go to the inside of 2, but that will put him on the outside for 3. Now, will he go for the cutback under braking or round the outside? He tries to hang it round the outside, and I think MDC's got it. Oh no, hold on a second. He's going to hang round the outside into 4, and that's one thing you don't do because you simply lose so much momentum. But MDC says, you know what, screw the rule book, I'm going to continue to hang around the outside, and he finally settles down, and well, settles down into the battle for P11 for the time being. I think he's going to wait a little bit longer now. As we move it back, and we can see that Iman is pulling away with Dylan currently sitting in P2, and Biscuit is really all over the back of Dylan as they're coming through 11 now, and Yaya in that mix as well. McCann is pulling away a little bit from Spalgazin, but it's not enough to give him clearance to just simply have the run in P5. But these two are separate as Kleinsey's trying to catch up to him, and D is falling away a little bit. And Gret is currently in P9 still, and Eclipse still holding on to that P11 by comparison with MDC, who's fallen back a little bit, and that's enabled Chronic Opal to catch up. But coming up into the hairpin then, for the third time of asking, you can see that Olaf Biscuit has gone to the inside, and Dylan has had to respect the space. And I think that Olaf is just simply trying to force Dylan into a mistake here by simply getting himself in a position where Dylan has to hesitate about closing the door and taking the ideal racing line. And you can see that it's meant that Biscuit has had a very strong run out the corner. But we're just going to look from the picture of what is Yaya's car by comparison with these other guys as they charge up into the low speed chicane. And you can see as they come into the corner here that Olaf is really in that no man's no man's ground in terms of he's got the toe of one guy in front, but behind him's a guy who's got the toe of two cars, and they're all charging after the race leader at the moment, but he's just pulling away, very gradually pulling away, and he's just got to keep up this momentum right now, Iman, and I think that Iman is going to have this race win unless he makes a mistake here. And speaking of mistakes, Yaya almost bins it coming out at 19, and Biscuit is going for the move here into turn 20, and as they come in, he's going to be on the inside, and he's going to try and extend his turn through the apex here to carry as much speed as possible, but he just misses the wall there, but he gets it unsettled on the curve. That was a good move for P2, but will Dylan have a response as they come onto the final lap into the first corner? I don't think Dylan's going to go for the move here, but meanwhile McCann pulling over to that inside once again to break the distant toe initially, and you can see behind him Clancy has actually got up into P6. I think Clancy cutting a lot of the first turn there. Now, will that be a penalty for Clancy? That was right on the limit, if not, because you could see that he had all four wheels pretty much onto the tarpaulin, the two left-hand wheels on the right-hand line of track limits there. And Spalkazan has dropped down to P7, and D behind them in P8 right now, running a comfortable race. And behind these guys, you can see KLS1 in P10, and Krynik Opel now up into a P11, albeit briefly. He's going to be going for the move into turn number 3 to pick up P10, and he's got it done, as KLS1 has essentially been barracked into a position whereby he's simply got no room, and both drivers swinging very sideways. It's synchronized drifting, but I think Krynik Opel has got it done there, and now KLS1 is going to be under pressure. But hold on a second, ladies and gentlemen, we can see that Cliff has fallen back massively. Now, what has happened to Dylan as he was coming through turn number 5 there? And I think what it is, Dylan made a mistake because he has dropped back massively from Olaf Biscuit and is now in a fight for P3. That's a disaster, and he's battling through turn 11 of all places with Yaya right now, and Yaya is going to have the initial inside line out of 11, but it means he'll be on the outside. And I think what Dylan is trying to do here is get himself onto that racing line and trying to make Yaya go defensive, and he's going to go there. He's just trying to intimidate as much as possible, weaving from left to right, and it's not working out for Dylan at the moment. But Yaya immediately going defensive into the hairpin here for 14, and Dylan's going to go for the cutback. You see him lining it up, but Yaya knows how to plant the car on the apex of a corner. We saw that back at Autodrome Largo Maggiore, as did Olaf Biscuit, but Dylan then going for the move, the lunge into turn 15 for the bridge, drifting out of the corner there, but getting it planted. And I think now it's a question of, will Yaya be able to respond as they come across the bridge? Then he's going to go for it because he's right up the rear of Dylan, but he's going to go to the outside. Dylan taking the defensive line here, and I think Dylan's going to try and cut all of Yaya's momentum, but Yaya hanging it round the outside and then taking the inside in the second half of the low-speed chicane, and Yaya is back in front. Well, you never see that. To the side for the low-speed chicane, bar my biscuit. I've not seen that in 2 years of GT Sport, and now today I have. And as Yaya is coming through the corner here, I think he's going to be holding on for the time being, but as they come around then onto the final corner, will Dylan go for a late move? As Clancy has moved up into P5, he's got past Balgazan, and we can see that Yaya is taking a defensive line initially, but coming across the line to complete the race is Iman by 1.1 seconds over Olaf Biscuit, and in the drag race to the finish line, it will be Yaya holding on just about ahead of Dylan Cliff, as we've got Clancy coming across in P5, and I think McCann has dropped away massively as Balgazan's come P6, D P7, McCann P8. There must have been a mistake from McCann at some point. De Great in P9. Then we've got Krynik Opel coming across the line in P10 here after a disastrous race start. And, well, that's going to finish off the top 10. In the rear of your picture, we've got a battle for P11. It's a drag race to the line, and MDC just about wins that drag race for P11. KLS1 in P12. And then last but not least, our runners coming out the final corner now, and just grazing the barrier there, the safety barrier on the outside, is Eclipse in P13 coming across that finish line. Goodness me, another cracker of a race, but a new race winner, ladies and gentlemen, Iman. Well, that was an absolutely phenomenal second race. It was, well, it had everything. It had drama on the opening lap. It had some daring overtakes. It had some surprises, mistakes. It had a little bit of everything there for your entertaining viewing. We, of course, need to remind our host to to capture the replay there. We don't want to lose the replay, of course, for your viewing pleasure. But the fastest lap in the end went to Olaf Biscuit with a 2:32.7. Now, given that the fastest lap in race 1 was a 2:33.4, that goes to show you how much pace is within the guys up front in particular, they all have a lot of time which they can gain on one another. But I think the question is, as we can see, that KLS1 has left the room and so has Kleinstein. I'm not sure what's going on there, whether they're restarting connections or something along those lines, or they've had equipment failures, but we hope to get them back for race 3. But, well, it's anybody's guess out of that top 4 who is going to come across as our race winner after race number 3. But we finally have a new race winner within EU Division 1 for this season. I think Eman will feel very chuffed with himself in this one, having effectively binned race number 1 from a commanding position, and in race number 2 having started P7 and up into P3 before we even cleared 2 sectors in lap number 1. Eman will be feeling very happy. Well, with a little bit of a break now, our drivers will be starting to think about that pit stop race. The more strategic race is now about to come off, of course, where, for those who are not aware, we have 7 laps and our drivers in race number 3 must conduct a pit stop at some point. Now, with regards to that pit stop, they're not expected to take on any fuel. This race has been set up specifically so that fuel is not an issue. However, the key thing to note here is the big question of, do you take tyres in the pits or do you keep running? Now, the argument would be here, because each lap is so long and we know that tyre wear starts to come in at the end of lap number 4, that you may want to go for a tyre change here. But of course, that costs you more time in the pits. Now, a pit stop at Saint-Croix for just simply coming into the pits and taking on tyres is in the region, if I remember correctly, of about 8 to 10 seconds. Now, of course, that time to do the tyre change makes up approximately 3 seconds of that pit time. So you will gain 3 seconds by simply not changing tyres. But again, with each lap being 2.5 minutes long, just to simplify things, can you imagine what those tyres are going to feel like on the final 2 laps, i.e. laps 6 and 7? They're going to be in quite a worn state, and you can gain a lot of time by being on fresher tyres on a big circuit, because you've simply got more corners to use that greater grip in order to gain time. And that is the critical thing, in the fact that because we've got a long circuit here and tyre life is at an interesting premium, it means I think a number of drivers will be looking to make some major gains in the second half of the race will go for a tyre change in the pits. But we'll wait and find out. I'm just going to take a quick sip of water, and of course, with the time remaining now before we get race 3 underway, I think we're going to be trying to get one of our drivers back in. I'm not sure what's happened to Kleinstein 1978. But we will take a look around the circuit, of course, and we're going to follow Iman, our race winner last time out. Now Iman's in the pits and we get the glitched camera, which is why we need to get away from anybody who's in the pits. It's Valgazan here, simply throwing the car around once again. And really, as I say, the ultimate shock, or the greatest surprise of race number 2 was Iman's charge towards first place. And also the drop towards the end of Dylan Cliff, just a little bit, but of course still bringing home a very good finishing position. See Spalgazan there picking up a penalty, and now the cars will burn a bit of their penalty under braking, while the unfortunate natures of the lobbies that we race in is the fact that under braking you can burn some of your penalty time, because the game treats it as you slowing down the car in a braking zone and slowing down to serve your penalty effectively, which is why it's recommended that as soon as drivers come into a penalty zone they have to burn their penalties. Because the problem is, as you can see with a car ghosting like that, you can imagine if there's another car right behind Spalgazan and it breaks a bit deep and ends up clipping into Spalgazan's ghost, if Spalgazan was to suddenly unghost, it could lead to an absolute catastrophic collision between the 2 drivers, especially if you also throw a bit of a latency mixture in where one driver's got a much higher latency than the other driver. I'll put my finger up and say this, folks, I've been on the receiving end of it, and I've also caused it in an FIA race where I've had a much higher ping than the driver around me, and vice versa. And well, ping ball physics, as you know in GT Sport, can cause some interesting results. And we can see that Clancy has returned, so perhaps Clancy just needed to reset some equipment. So we are going to have all 13 drivers who were able to turn up today. Valev being the only driver who wasn't able to be here. Of course, we're going to have all 13 of our runners coming back out with the Porsche 962C machinery for the finale of today. Now, so you may be wondering at this point, why does it seem to be a one-make race? Well, it would appear that the Porsche 962C is offering our drivers the best balance in terms of performance and the ability to tune the car. I'm hopeful that in the other EU divisions this week we should see some more mixtures of cars. We may potentially see some Nissan R92Cs and some Mazda 787s here, given the straights on this circuit are much longer, the acceleration zones are more punchy as well. But we do also have the opening of the circuit, which is all those different 90-degree corners where a handling orientated Group C car such as the Sauber Mercedes C9 will do very well by comparison with its competitors, but of course it will suffer in the second half. So it is a up and down question, effectively an up and down equation, whereby this circuit does have that mixture of corners, and the focus here really is the fact that the Porsche 962C has a brilliant mix which enables our drivers, well, to feel comfortable wherever they go on this circuit. They're going to be able to get a good result. As we can see that KLS1 has just had to restart some more equipment. I think his connectivity has gone a little bit sideways. But KLS1 is just doing another quick rejoin. And Dylan Cliff here really giving us another example lap which we can follow and ride on board with as he's coming up into turn number 8. Nailing it on the brakes here, getting it nice and angled into the corner, and now coming through at 9 and up into 10 and hooking the car in nicely. Just missing the apex curve there a little bit. He'll probably be pinching himself to think I need to hit that curve just a bit more. It just gives you a tiny bit more rotation through turn number 10. But 11, he's not nailed that. And it's gone horrifically sideways. And that's one of the things about 11 as well that's worth noting is because there is a road surface change as you come into 11. What it means is the car actually jumps across the road surface change because you're coming from a bump in the road onto the new road surface, and that throws the car further out than you'd anticipate coming through 11. And that's why Dylan got caught out there, because his hope was that he would run the car to the exit curve as Olaf is now going to come charging through. Of course, not running into Dylan there. Dylan making sure not to spin the car around in front of the British driver. But the car just goes further and further to the left and gets thrown further to the left, and then you want to try and use that curve. As Spalgazan is going around in the opposite direction on the circuit. Fortunately ghosted for our drivers here, because otherwise that'd be an absolutely nasty head-on collision. Which, well, given that we've got one car running at 164 miles an hour and another one running at approximately 140, that's going to be an impact force with the equivalent of a 300 mile an hour collision between two cars. Not something you really want, as I think some of our other drivers, such as Garrett, are practicing running this track in reverse, which it can be quite a fun track in reverse, but personally for me, well, and also let me know in the chat as well what your preference is with regards to the A variant of Saint-Croix. I love it in the forward variant just simply because it has that great mixture of corners and also that feeling that after getting through that very tough and difficult windy section, i.e. the first half, which is all those 90-degree corners, you have a much more flowing second half of the circuit where you can really use your car's power to its utmost and toss the car around. But with that, we are being told by race control that the race is about to get underway. So it's race 3, ladies and gentlemen. It is time for us to see who's going to come out on top and pick up the maximum in the bonus points round. 50% more points for each finishing position. So lining up on your left will be Ark Iman. On the right it'll be Olaf Biscuit. Behind them Yaya and Dylan Cliff respectively. But keep an eye out for Spalgazan and D on the third row. Both drivers trying to make up ground from the previous races, even more so. So looking out for those 5 red lights and then it'll be go. And it's lights out and away they go. And Iman not having the best of starts initially. Looks as though he bogged down a little bit. One driver has got it very wrong. And hold on a second. We have lost a lot of drivers already. I think we're being told there's an abort on this start, because we've only got 3 drivers here. It is a restart, ladies and gentlemen. We're just waiting to find out what happened there. Our Clancy was missing. Okay, that's fair enough. Thank you for pointing out, Benjeet. So all of our drivers will want to get back out on circuit immediately. And you can see that Eclipse there is doing a bit of a practice start. We're going to take a quick sip of water whilst we've got an opportunity. Okay, and now we are going to be getting underway then with race number 3 for the second attempt, for the second time of asking. All right, ladies and gentlemen, we're counting down once again then. Okay, so attempt number 2. Iman on the left, Olaf on the right. And then we've got the fast drivers of Yaya and Dylan Cliff behind. And Clancy in P5 are looking to make up more ground. And watch out for Spalgazan, who will be wanting to hold on to P6. And it's lights out and away they go once again. And all of our drivers had a relatively good start here. Nobody really making the biggest gains off the line. You can see that Dylan's had a good run initially, but he's been caught behind Olaf going into turn number 1. And Iman taking a very good defensive line through 1 and into the run to 2 now. As we can see that one driver has gone very wide. And I think that's McCann, who's gone very wide off circuit. Will be rejoining shortly as they charge up into turn 1. Then Iman leading on Olaf, and behind them Dylan dropping a little bit back into the mix now. As we see Clancy holding on to that P5 at the moment, and Spalgazan has dropped a place to D. D haven't made one place up at the start here, and then Gray up into P8 ahead of MDC. But nobody right now really going for an adventurous move here. But you can see that Yaya is already feeling the pressure off of Dylan Cliff, and what it means is our 2 front runners are just simply pulling away and holding on to a race of their own right now. And meanwhile behind them you can see that D in P6 is feeling some pressure from Spalgazan, who in turn is being pressured by De Grey. Now Great goes for the squeeze there into turn 8, and I just don't think that was going to work out for Great. He tried to go for a move that didn't exist, and you've got MDC now up into P8 with Spalgazan simply just trying to pull away. And Great's now going to look back as Spalgazan gets it all sorts of wrong, coming out of 10, and that's a disaster for Spalgazan, who goes all the way down the field. And MDC follows in terms of going off at 11, and he needs to stay to the left because he's essentially just rejoined right into the middle of the track. Oh, careful MDC, the stewards are going to be screaming about that one afterwards. And as they come through the high-speed chicane then, you see Iman is ahead of Biscuit, and Yaya has cleared away from Cliff now, who is falling back, and Clancy is all over the back of Dylan, and he's going for the move here on the inside into the hairpin. Now will he be able to hold it together as Yaya's got to burn a small penalty, and you can see that whilst Clancy hasn't able to get the move done, that in return D has got away, and meanwhile Garrett with a penalty right now, and Opal is up into P7. What on earth is going on between these drivers? It's absolute pandemonium. We've got drivers are literally going off at left, right and centre at the bridge, and in return that means now we've got a run where MDC has just been sandwiched down into P10, and Great is now down into P11. We'll find out what happened there shortly, ladies and gentlemen. But as we're following them all through into the final 2 sectors, then we can see that McCann is back up into P7 after going off at the start on turn 1. So McCann has had a good recovery drive so far on lap 1, making the recovery effort early on, which is always helpful. And KLS1 up into P8, and Chronic Opal and MDC now charging head to tail as they go into turn number 19. And you can see that MDC is on a flyer here, trying to get past the Australian. And as they come out of the final corner then, after 1 lap, it's Iman followed by Olaf Biscuit, and immediately Iman pulling to the defensive inside. Then it's Yaya followed by Dylan Cliff. Then we've got Clancy, as we can see that D pulls into the pits, and it's McCann then who's going to come across in P6 right now, followed by KLS1, then Chronic Opal defending against MDC, and then behind him we are going to have, as D returns to the field in P8 and got himself some clear track space actually. And then we're looking in P11, we've got Garrett, followed by Spalgazan, and then Eclipse, who's just come out of the pits in P13. We'll have to watch out for these early pitters, of course, because they'll be trying to go for an undercut. And we can see that Olaf has not had the best runs, but whilst we've got a little bit of a breather out on circuit right now, well, I say that Chronic is up into P8 and got past Careless One there, and I think now he's going to charge after P7. Well, actually, no, D is up into P7, I should say. He's got past Chronic Opal and charging along in P7. You could imagine that D will feel a lot fresher. Now, let's take a look and see if D picked up new tyres. He did not go for a new set of tyres, so D is going to be feeling a lot of tyre wear at the end of this race. Meanwhile, with regards to our other pitter, was it the case that Eclipse went for a new set of tyres? He's got all sorts of wrong coming out of 6th there. And no, he didn't go for a new set of tyres, so our drivers opting not to change tyres so far. But I wonder how that's going to be playing out as they come into the very late stages of this race. But now that we've got a little bit of a breather here with Clancy falling off the back of Dylan Cliff, I think it's time for us to take a very quick look at what happened towards the end of lap number 1, because there was, as I say that, Chronic Opal goes wide out of 11, and that means he's going to drop all the way down to P10. He's got to be careful because Garrett's coming through, and Garrett taking a wide line out of 11 to make sure there's no collision, and that means Garrett is now back up into 10th place, and I think Chronic is going to be overtaken by his teammate very shortly. And Spalgazan is coming up into the high-speed chicane, and you can see that Spalgazan has actually had to slam on the brakes because he knows he can't get past. Not there being a single racing line through that corner, but as they come across the bridge then, we can see that there's no change up front right now. McCann is just gradually pulling along in terms of P6, but he's got D charging after him. MDC's up into P8 and Careless One in P9, but we're going to find out what happened in terms of that opening lap. So as they were coming into the hairpin here, Gray had a penalty to serve, and Chronic went deep. Garrett got it all sorts of wrong as well, but had to burn his penalty effectively. McCann was on the inside and went round, but then you can see Chronic just carried too much momentum under brake, and he woke too late as he tried to take an inside line there to try and get the move done. So all 4 of those drivers just seeming not to have a good run. But speaking of good runs right now, you can see that our 2 race leaders are pulling away still from Yaya, just creeping that gap out, and Dylan and Clancy are in the mix. There's only 6.5 seconds between Clancy and P5 and our race leader right now, but Clancy is falling off the charging pack for 1 to 4. Meanwhile, behind, you've got McCann, who's holding on to P6 right now, but you can imagine that D is getting just that ever closer per lap, and I think D is going to be going for a move in the near future. As we look back from McCann's car right now, you can see D has got a huge amount of momentum. Is he going to go for a move into turn 1? No, he thinks better of it. He lifts out of it. Smart move by the Dutchman on his fellow countryman, and I think he's just going to size up McCann, knowing that McCann does have to pit. But of course, in D's mind, he'll want to get past McCann if he feels that McCann is holding him up lap time-wise, because otherwise D is essentially restricted his race to finishing in P6, because he's already done that pit stop, remember, so any time he gains now on the race leaders will be vital, as McCann gets it wide out of 4 into 5, and now D, I think, has just got the move done. I think D's not going to have to worry about having a fight against McCann, and McCann settles in behind as they come through into 6. D has got it now, and D is the man on a mission right now, and we have to keep an eye on how far he gets up the field, with Clancy currently 5 seconds up the road from him. That may be enough for D to actually get ahead at the pit stops. Now, as we come back to our race leaders right now, you can see that Yaya has definitely fallen away from Dylan. I think that might have been a mistake from Yaya, because that gap has opened up to 2.7 seconds, and Dylan is now within 4/10 of Yaya, but there's no change in position, and D is creeping away very gradually from McCann, and Careless One is up into P8 right now, but he's feeling some pressure from MDC. Now, he goes wide out of 10. MDC surely must be going for a move or sizing it up, coming out of 11 then, because Careless One is not going to have much pace. He's going to have dirt on those tyres as well, which means it's going to be even harder for him to maintain a high average apex speed through turn number 11. As they come down into 12, is MDC going to go for the move early? He swings out to the racing line to the outside, but Careless One blocks it off, and I think MDC's thinking that it'll get him simply going into 14. So will we see that? MDC is building a lot of momentum. Is he going to go for it on the brakes as they come up into 14? And we see Careless One has actually picked up a penalty running wide of track limits through the high-speed chicane, and Careless One will have to burn that penalty across the bridge, if not sooner, as they're coming into the corner here, and MDC goes round the outside and just gets it on the grass, but hooks it up just about, and I think MDC has got it done there. Now moving up into P8, but he will have Chronic Opal on his 6, and Chronic Opal is going to the inside into the high-speed chicane, and I think under braking he's going to have it. The Australian has got the move done initially. Will MDC come back on the other side of the chicane? Not quite. He's got the move, and that means he's up into P8, and Spalgazan is in P10 right now ahead of Careless One. And then further down the road, 3.5 seconds is De Great, followed by Eclipse 5 seconds further down the road. But meanwhile, up front, you can see that getting closer and closer right now and putting the pressure on is Olaf Biscuit over the last couple of laps. He has been sizing out as Yaya and Dylan both pit from P3, P4, and Clancy comes in from P5. So this is critical for these 2 drivers right now, ladies and gents. What you can imagine is that Olaf will be thinking to himself, well, I can't fight Iman too hard right now, because otherwise we're going to cost one another time, and the guys behind us will come out ahead of us or right up our backside. Because these guys had approximately 3 seconds ahead of Dylan Cliff, where they're going to lose that every time time they fight into corners right now. But in terms of the pit stops, Dylan is in P3, Yaya has dropped to P4. I think Yaya has actually gone for a new set of tyres. Yep, Yaya has gone for a new set of tyres, whereas Dylan has also gone for a set of tyres there. So it's just how it's played out in terms of the pit stops. And McCann right now has not pitted, so that's why he's splitting D. And McCann right now is the cork in the bottle for D, and a bit of an inconvenience. I think D's going to try and get back past as soon as possible because McCann's in the way, and Kleinsee has lost out to D here. That's worth noting through the pit stops, as Kleinsee, has he taken on a new set of tyres? Yes, he has. So that's how he's lost out, but he's not lost out by too much, and D is really going to feel the struggle, I think, as he comes onto the final 2 laps. Those tyres will start to show significant graining, and it will mean that he won't have as much grip, particularly through the high-speed corners such as 11, where the car will start to drift wider of apex than he would want it to. And through the first half of the track in particular, he'll find that making those right angle corners with a high apex speed is going to become harder as well, or he won't be as confident on the throttle on exit. But our 2 race leaders up the front are not really changing, but what is changing right now, with a huge gap to the guys behind, is Dylan, who's feeling a lot of pressure for Yaya. But I think this is just intimidation from Yaya, because it'd be crazy to go for a move, as we said earlier. And behind, McCann got it all sorts of wrong, grazing the barrier, but he's just about parked it on the apex of the chicane, in the high-speed chicane, and it means he's defending to the inside, and McCann going into full defensive mode here. And this is what you want to see from McCann, because he is costing the 2 guys behind him huge amounts of time. D's going to the inside, into the bridge, so coming up into 15, I think it's going to be a drag race, and Kleinsee has got it horrifically wrong. Kleinsee is into the wall coming out of 15. Oh no, I feel sorry for the Australian. He's been trying so hard to get back into the fight for the top 5, and it's been a disaster for him as McCann goes wide across the opening half of the low speed chicane, and Diesel, and hold on a second, what has happened to Yaya? What has happened to the British driver? We're going to need to see what's happened to. Did he just plant it into the wall? So he's coming across the bridge here, and as we look forward then, you can see he was right on the backside of Dylan Cliff coming into the braking zone, and I think he's going to nail this. Was he just too adventurous on the power as he went across the second half of the chicane? So he cuts it across nicely, and he just simply clipped too much of the chicane there. He hit the bump in terms of jumping over the chicane surface, as into the pits comes Olaf Biscuit, and Iman right now is our race leader as Olaf has pitted, and that gap is only sitting at 3.4 seconds. And that is a huge change of momentum right now, because Olaf will know that essentially he's got to charge after him, man, as we've got Dylan Cliff as well, who's running around in P3, and we've got more drivers coming to the pits, and McCann in P6 right now, and putting a fresh set of tyres, and he's going to go hunting and racing for the last couple. But Yaya has dropped away because of that incident. That's a disaster for the Brit, as we've got Spalgazin in P7 right now, and Kleinsee behind him in P8, and Kleinsee had a disaster at the bridge. Now, will we catch that on camera? Not quite. We missed that on camera, but what you can imagine is he simply experienced a bit of snap oversteer as he went across the change of road surface from the road that he was on going into 15 onto the bridge track surface, as there's a bump there, and that just unsettled the car too much for him to cope with at the time. Well, that is absolutely crazy from Kleinsee in terms of he's now going to have to charge himself back into P5 once again, and he's definitely doing it. You can see just how quickly he's running behind Spalgazin right now on worn tyres, but he's on a charge, and I think Spalgazin has not got long left to live in terms of holding on this at P7 if Kleinsee has got anything to say about it. Now, looking further around the field, of course, we're just going to wait and see if Kleinsee goes for the move into 11 or in the run down to 12. I think Spalgazin here will know that as Kleinsee goes wide, and in fact cost himself a lot of momentum into 11, and the dirt on his tyres, there particularly his left, will mean that he has less grip as he almost runs off the track surface there. Going for 11, and he's lost a huge amount of momentum on Spalgazin, and he's falling back into the clutches of the Australian behind. But looking up front, you can see that Iman right now, the gap is dropping between himself and Olaf. And I think Olaf here has decided, if I can't get it done by overtaking him on circuit, I'll get it done strategically. And Olaf has closed that gap down by approximately 7/10 of a second over the course of this lap so far. But then again, Iman is very strong in these final 2 sectors. You can see that gap is now starting to open up. And Dylan is holding on to P3 right now. And D in P4 is having a whale of a time just simply rolling with it. But Yaya is charging after him. And you can see just how much time Yaya is stripping out a D per lap, in the fact that he's already stripped approximately a second so far out of this lap. And of course, Yaya has gone for those new tyres, whereas D has not. And D's tyres, let's just give you an idea on the telemetry board, ladies and gentlemen. Look how heavily grained those left-hand tyres are in particular. And that means he is losing a lot of grip as he goes wide out of 19. That tyre wear coming in on the right as well. That front right will be feeding it through there under braking and rotation. And I think D has got to be aware of the fact as Yaya has pulled another second out of him in this sector sector alone, I should point out. And I think D here is going to be thinking to himself that he's very vulnerable and will need to switch to defensive mode versus Yaya if he's going to hold on to that P4. As Dylan is just simply pulling away right now. And looking further down the field here, we're not really seeing too much. Well, I say that, we've got a three-way fight here for what is P7, as Clancy is in P7 at the moment, and it's a drag race into turn number 1 as they go onto lap number 6, and Clancy cuts turn number 1 massively. Now, surely that is going to be a track limits penalty for Clancy there. Unless there was some sort of contact there, our students will have to deal with a penalty out in the near future. I think there's been actually no penalty applied because of the contact between the drivers, but Clancy had a disastrous moment for 1, and he's gone absolutely sideways and drifted into Spalgazan out of 3, and that means Spalgazan and Kronikoval are still being held behind the Austrian driver there, as the Australian and the Brit are both trying to find a way desperately past him, and Clancy is just struggling at this point in the race. He just cannot shake the pressure of the two behind him, and it means that things are getting out of hand in terms of him being able to chase after McCann. I think McCann right now will be slapping his fingers together and thinking, right, this is perfect, I'll hold on to P6. But then behind Clancy, you've got Opel and Spalgazan sizing one another up. Spalgazan in particular really feeling the need to get back past Chronic Opel. But of course, both of these drivers have to be aware of the fact that they're teammates. So if they fight one another here, they'll rob one another of potential points if one of them finishes in P7. They'd ideally like to finish P7 and P8, not P8 and P9. And looking further around then, we can see that Chronic Opel is really carrying a huge momentum. Clancy went wide there out of 11. He kicked up some gravel, which means that his run out of the corner and into 12 now is going to be compromised. And I think Chronic Opel is going to drag race him in. Now, will Clancy go full defensive here? If so, this is going to be a huge momentum. And Chronic Opel almost snapping it off the circuit there. And that means watch Spalgazan right now. He's going to have huge momentum into the hairpin here. And I think he might go for it. No, he settled in behind. I think he's thinking to himself, the number one rule of racing is you never take out your teammate. And I think Spalgazan is being smart about it here. Although there was an opportunity for him to go for a dastardly lunge if he wanted to into 14 because of the lack of momentum from Clancy and Chronic Opel into the hairpin. But I think it's going to settle down for the time being. And we're just going to watch him across the bridge here. I think the gap has opened up enough for another lap, unless Clancy has a disastrous final sector here. As you can see, Chronic is getting very close under braking, but he's just not able to get anything done as he goes deep into the chicane. And that is going to cost him an entry into what is turn number 17. And you can see already that as a result of that, Clancy has pulled away. Now, Imman, meanwhile, as they come onto the final lap, then currently sitting in the lead. Now, just to double check, have we seen Imman? Well, I think we've seen Imman pit at some point. We're just going to double check that for you, ladies and gentlemen. And in fact, I think if he did his pit stop, it must have been on lap number 4 because we've got Olaf here charging after him right now, albeit quite a bit down. I think Olaf did take his pit stop on lap number 4. So I think we missed Imman's pit stop off camera, unfortunately for you. But it does look as though Biscuit is on a charge here and really trying to make up as much ground as possible. And Cliff at this point, a 6-second gap to Yaya, who has been in the fight with D, and he's finally got back past D. D having dropped down to P5 right now, and he's got McCann charging after him. And I think he's going to be thinking to himself, he's just got to hold on a little bit longer, as behind in the battle for P7, as we take away some of the telemetry data on the screen, we can see that Clancy is still holding on for dear life versus the other two drivers. And we will keep an eye on Biscuit because we are hearing that he is closing the gap at a phenomenal rate of knots on Imman, but I don't know if it's going to be enough as Biscuit is putting in the lap of his life. But Clancy is having to hold on here, and meanwhile in the battle for P5 we can see McCann is closing very gradually. That gap only 8 tenths off of D right now. 7 tenths under braking into turn number 8, but McCann is just not able to get close enough in order to effect a pass. It's going to be in the second half of the lap, and I reckon it'll probably be into 19 or 20 if he's going to have a shot at this. Now, looking at further back, of course, in the battle for P7, we can see that Opel and Spalgazan are still sitting behind Clancy. They're not able to make any ground, and Spalgazan actually dropped off here. I think he may have made a mistake through 8. And then coming around then into 11, we can see Opel has had the better momentum this time, and Clancy is going to have to stay wide here because Opel's on his inside. Now, will he go for the return move here on the charge down into turn number 12? It would be mad if he decided to do it this early. He's going to go to the outside and force Opel to hold a little bit of a defensive line. Now, will he go for the cutback here? As he does, he gains a lot of momentum. You can see the momentum gain. Opel going to the inside, and I think that Clancy actually impacted the rear of Opel's car there and wasn't able to get it done. And we can see Spalgazan has actually got past us. Clancy has just dropped away there, and Spalgazan has backed out because he thinks that was a push to pass. Smart play by Spalgazan. That looked a bit push to pass, and Clancy is back up into P8 there. But meanwhile, up front with 2.6 seconds gap between it, I think Imman is going to have the run home here, as he is holding on right now. And looking around, we can't see that McCann has got past D yet, but D's got it horrifically wrong out of turn 17 and about to come across the line. Your race winner, ladies and gentlemen, from the United Kingdom is Imman by 2.3 seconds over Olaf Biscuit, and it is a further 12.5 seconds back to Cosmic Esports' Dylan Clear from Ireland, who's going to be bringing up the bottom step of the podium with a well-earned third place. And then we have got a sizable gap all the way down to fourth in the form of Yaya, who has come home in P4, and I think he'll be happy with that result. Meanwhile, McCann is going to be coming across in P5 after D's incident, and that has meant that Chronic Opal has made his way up into P6, and D, meanwhile, has come home in P7. Now, was there something between Kleinsey and D? We have to wonder there, because that is quite a gap between Kleinsey and Chronic Opal. And then we've got MDC coming home in P9, and Spalgazan has had a complete meal of it coming home in P10. We didn't see that on camera, but Spalgazan seems to have had something go horrifically wrong right towards the end, but he's going to be coming home in P10. And then coming home in P11 will be KLS1, and then in P12 it'll be De Gret. And then last but not least, currently sitting in a bit of an awkward position at turn number 18. I think he's got it wrong coming out of 17 is Eclipse. But let's give a round of applause for every driver, ladies and gentlemen, and even more so for Eclipse as he continues on his way, and we're bringing his own 962 home within the next 30 to 40 seconds in P13. So we're just going to follow Eclipse home, but what a cracker of an absolute finale to tonight. It was a mad run in terms of the overall race, and there are a number of our drivers going for the fresher tyres in the pits compared to other drivers. And it worked out for some of our drivers on the fresher tyres, whereas for others it didn't quite work out by the looks of things. But Eclipse coming across the line in P13 to finish off tonight's final race. And your race winner, ladies and gentlemen, Iman. Well, that was our finale, ladies and gentlemen, and what a phenomenal finale. Now, you do have to wonder, the big question, which I think we'll all be asking ourselves when we're about to head to sleep tonight, if Yaya had not had that moment when he hit the wall, where would he have finished? I believe it was Yaya, but if he had not had that moment, coming out of turn 17, could we have been looking at a potential podium for Yaya or even higher? Because he lost a huge amount of momentum because of the impact with the wall. Fastest lap went to Olaf Biscuit on the final lap. He put in a phenomenal lap. The fastest lap in race trim of the night of a 2:32.1. And I think Olaf literally tore the wheels off of that 962 to get it to do that. That was phenomenal. Of course, all of our drivers put in a huge effort. Kleinsey had it go a bit wrong towards the end of this one as well. Coming home in P8 after a good start in P5, but I think he'll be feeling to himself that he's got great momentum and he just needs to nail the final race when we head to Circuit Le Saf next week in all three of our EU divisions, of course. But we've still got plenty more action for EU Division 2 and EU Division 3 tomorrow and Wednesday, respectively. But now, as we move away from the final standings, then it's time for us to engage in a little bit of King of the Karts, and I will happily be taking part in that as well, I'm pleased to say. But Olaf did take tyres and he absolutely went for it in terms of on those fresh tyres, but it just wasn't enough. Iman was able to hold it together. But it was a phenomenal race in the end, in race number 3. And then we're just waiting for our host to change things over. But again, just taking another quick look through the standings. I think the biggest surprise there, and somebody who deserves a huge round of applause as well, is McCann. In the fact that he was able to bring that car home in P5. He didn't have the best race pace as a whole over the course of race number 3, but he was very consistent. And that's one of the things it's worth noting. McCann has had a huge amount of consistency. He's had perhaps 1 or 2 mistakes, but it's normally been at the start of the race, and he's just settled in and been able to achieve those results. And D, having that disastrous ending to race number 3, you have to feel for D, because I think he would have been bringing it home in P5 after defending so hard against McCann for so long, or he definitely would have been in P6, but that was ceded to Chronic Opal in the end. Goodness me. And also we just need to remind our host who saved the replay. Okay, well, it's time for us then to do a little bit of King of the Karts. So we are going to go to track with our little shifter 125. Take a quick sip of water before we do. Okie dokie, so believe. There we go. Get away from that view. Very unstable car right now, actually. Might be easier to do this on a controller, I'm wondering. King of the Karts, of course, being just a little bit of fun at the end of every race night for all of our drivers. I wasn't able to take part in it last week for 2 of the 3 race nights due to a 2-hour endurance event I was practicing for. But then I took part in Wednesday nights and won my first ever King of the Karts. So, of course, we've got a bit of a premise here. We're going to try and get a good result tonight. So we are good to go for King of the Karts. So here we go. So let's see what we can achieve. Yep, it's definitely easier on the controller. That's what I did it with last week. But let's give it a go on the steering wheel and pedals. That'll be a good laugh. Alrighty then. So we're starting right at the rear, so there's no pressure on us. That's good news. Cheers, clips. So it's 1 lap around here today. The difficult thing here, of course, is because of road surface changes, it will cause the cart's rear end to destabilise. 4th gear here because we're going uphill. Oh, that's a lot of momentum. We caught it, we caught it. 3rd gear because we can run wide of apex. There we go, stable. Oh, there we go. Whoa, there she goes. Just a bit too aggressive on the downshift there through the corner. Oh, it would have worked out. We can catch up. I'm sure there's going to be plenty of argy-bargy before they get to that finish line. As you can see, actually, there's been a bit of argy-bargy already. We're going to get a very distant tow here off of our Kimmerman. In fact, I think we've got Olaf here just coming through with an absolute rocket of a car. That is one monster of a car. Don't want to use that curb. Really don't want to use that curb. Whee! There he goes. Poor old MDC. Well, hello there, Ola. Now we're going to need as much tow as possible along it, because they're all going to start knocking one another about. One for a P3. There we go, P3. I was almost at my kart pace on the pad there, to be honest. I think I made that mistake. I think I could have been a lot closer to the front. Alrighty, ladies and gentlemen. Well, with that is tonight's program over. And if you have enjoyed, be sure to subscribe to the Twitch channel if you haven't already. And if you've already subscribed, well, feel free to spread the love, spread the word, let other people know that if they haven't got any motorsport entertainment on and they want to see some sim racing entertainment, then they should drop them by at the stream. We've got 2 more live streams lined up for you as of tomorrow and Wednesday. We've got EU Division 2 tomorrow, of course, and EU Division 3 on Wednesday. And then even more so, outside the GTSRL, we have got the finale of 2020 for the Ace Lift Design Endurance Championship on Thursday. So plenty of racing and commentating to come. But I have been your host, TX141, also known as Paul Walsh or Britain a Spit, depending on what media you follow me on. And until tomorrow at what will be 7:30, because we won't be doing the track demo tomorrow, it's goodbye from me, and until then, stay safe, stay well, stay smiling, and remember to stay on track. Good night.